Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku had green Amaterasu Quirk? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
A decade ago, your ideal family was the Midoriya family. Two gorgeous 3-year-old twins, a father who took care of the children, and a mother who was a pro-hero. They had a happy existence. Until a villain killed Hisashi one day. Though not as much as Inko, the children did cry. She was devastated and felt terrible about not being able to defend her spouse. As a wife and a hero, she felt inadequate. After 5 months, Inko remarried Toshinori Yagi, a blonde man with sky-blue eyes, normal height, and below-average body mass. He helped Inko see that she is not to blame for what occurred to her late spouse and was a gentle, funny, and modest man who got along well with the children. They glued the pieces back together, but it took some time. Sometimes, not everyone can be saved. It's part of being a hero. The Yagas were content. After a year, 4-year-old Izuku stood motionless in the center of the living room, gazing at the framed pictures of his stepfather's mother figure and teacher, Nana Shimura, and his late father, Hisashi Midoriya. Izuku was very similar to Hisashi. He had the same wavy bush of hair as his father, but it was more black than green like his mother's. Izuku spoke to his father's photo as though he could speak to him, unlike his sister. To ensure he wouldn't forget, he wrote down his pleasant memories with his elderly father as soon as he learned to write. Toshinori told him stories about the woman who might have been his grandmother, describing her as a great hero. Someone he aspires to fulfill. As Izuku concluded his conversation with his relatives, Izumi arrived and pulled her brother out of the house. "Hi Dad, hi Grandma. Izumi and I are gonna learn what quirks we have today. We're gonna become sibling heroes and make you proud, just you watch," they said. Izuku almost tripped over his sister's excitement. "Come on, Izuku. I want to find out what quirk I got," he said. Although he was also thrilled, this was a significant event for him. He exclaimed, "Oh okay. Bye Dad, bye Grandma." Izumi eventually got him out the door and into the car, saying, "They're just pictures, they can't hear you, silly," instead. Following the hospital visit, Izuku's entire world fell apart. Izumi was nearly destined to be a great hero because she shared her mother's peculiarity. Izuku, meanwhile, had nothing. According to the doctor, he had no peculiarities. 20% of the population never developed a power. The boy's life took a drastic turn at that point. Their parents gave him pitying and contemptuous glances while praising his sister. Izuku made an effort to be glad for Izumi, but he was internally grieving since she took center stage. As though his lack of eccentricities changed their perception of him. Izuku apologized to his grandmother and father for disappointing them before going to bed. Kindergarten in some ways, school was worse than home. All of the students in the class made fun of Izuku. But Katsuki and Izumi were praised as gifted kids. His sister and friend also joined in, stating that he would never measure up to them. To his heart, it felt like a sword. To have his two closest friends and family abandon him because of circumstances beyond his control. Second year of middle school. With a stack of papers, the teacher began, "Okay, we're about halfway through the school year, and it's about time for you kids to consider your futures." With the exception of one student who was taking notes on heroes he saw on the street, his peers were only half listening. He tossed the papers and the students started indiscriminately exploiting their peculiarities. "I could pass out a bunch of boring career questionnaires. But what for?" he said. "Except for 3. I know you all want to become heroes." "Hey teach," said a cocky blonde who had his feet on his desk. The moss ball next to him, leaning in her seat, had a sneer as arrogant as his. "Don't get these extras' hopes up, else they'll think they have a shot at the big leagues like us." The two most gifted kids in their grade, Katsuki Bakugo and Izumi Yagi, said, "Sad to say, but most of the quirks here are only good enough for D-list heroes." The pair just challenged everyone to a battle to prove their value, despite the class's fury at their conceit. Why do they always act this way? Izuku buried his head in his notebook and thought. The instructor noted that they had a real chance of getting into UA, the nation's most renowned hero school, due to their outstanding test scores. Despite the shocked gasps and whispers in the audience, the two triumphantly declared that UA would be fortunate to possess them. Seeking to overtake All Might and Teleki, they would rule the hero rankings and become the wealthiest pair ever. They would be revered and known by people all around the world, and it all begins at UA Elevated. "Oh, Izuku, you want to go to UA, too, huh?" Izuku's uneasy shuffling in his seat was the only sound in the room. Everyone in the class started laughing. Izuku sprang up from his chair and exclaimed, You must be kidding, right? How's a quirkless kid gonna get into any hero school? Actually, they got rid of that rule. I could be the first one. Raj. Katsuki exploded Izuku's desk with an animalistic roar. Izumi threw him smashing into the back wall of the room as the blast knocked him off his feet. She spat with contempt, looking ashamed and repulsed at her own twin. This again? When will you learn? She asked. Listen up, Deku. Katsuki said, flashing the most sly smile. Just because your stepdad's gonna teach there doesn't change what a hopeless failure you are. You're even worse than the rest of these damn rejects. Think UA would take you in when they could have us? Izuku attempted to retreat from them, but he was already facing the wall. He glanced down at his feet and said, and no, that's not it at all. I know I'm not in your league, but, as Bakugo and his sister hovered over him, smoke emerged from his hands. I've wanted to be a hero since I was little. Like mom and grandma. I can at least try, right? Bakugo said. Their peculiarities hung over him like a group of devils in hell. What the fuck kind of delusion do you live in? Fine. Go on and try. You'll be remembered as a martyr. That's the best you could hope for, others said. The pack leaders were the Mossball and the Pomeranian. Deku tried desperately to ignore the derisive laughs as he cast a dejected glance down. Defenseless Izuku, it's one thing to want to embarrass this already crappy school, but your family too. Old dad and grandma must be rolling in their graves. Several hours later, after an uneventful morning, Izuku was completing some hero-related notes. Mount Lady and Maruko, good night. Unfortunately, that concludes the pages in this volume. What pro will I begin with for this one? Izuku took out a brand new, forest green notepad, but it shot out of his hand and into the air. With Katsuki and their supporters, Izumi teasingly questioned, what have we here, Deku? Bakugo inquired, what is this, your 14th hero notebook? Izumi simply raised it higher as Izuku attempted to reach for his property. Katsuki grinned ill and added, you're going to have to go a little higher, Deku. Izuku's eyes were filled with terror as he gazed at them. Please. Not this again. He was told he had no other option by the callous expressions of his former best pals. He stood on his desk, sighing with optimism, and reached for his empty book. Izumi said, jump for it. This made Izuku even more miserable. Izuku leapt off the surface of his table and said, here it comes. Katsuki had an explosion ready to knock him off his feet the instant he did. Izuku fell to the ground in a burning heap and let out a painful cry. Katsuki wiped a tear from his eye and laughed, ha ha ha. Oh, that never gets old. Izuku reflected, it got old about 4 years ago. With a weak voice, he said, see can I have it back, now. Katsuki and Izumi grinned malevolently as a better thought occurred to them. Bakugo exploded and tossed the book out the window after she threw it to him. Why even try? Izuku, who was now barely experiencing anything, pondered. His reactions to this torture, which they cherished so much, became muted by the incessant repetition. He simply hoped that this cycle will come to an end eventually. The shattered and burned greenette was left on the floor as the bullies took the rest of their belongings and left. Katsuki said a few final remarks. Izuku's ears perked up ever so slightly when he said, you know, if you really want to be a hero, there might be a chance for ya. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. Suicide batsmanship. But Izumi's remarks are even worse than that. For a moment, Izuku's heart pulses with a long-forgotten emotion. Kachan, don't tell him that. What if he listens to you? His aspirations are dashed once more. Imagine how pissed old dad and grandma would be about being stuck with him. A still Izuku lay on the floor as the sick punks departed. He lay still for some minutes before getting up and gathering his belongings. As he walked out of the building, he thought, another day, another burn and bruise to treat. He stared out the window for a worryingly long moment before he did so. Maybe I'll leap out of the window the next time. It's undoubtedly a quick method to get away from them. Izuku was relieved that his new notebook was still empty. Gray soot had now blanketed the forest green cover, and the ashes on the corners had fallen off, leaving most of the pages a burnt caramel brown. Destroyed before I could give it a shot. Izuku thought, at least they're changing things up. He decided to take a different way home in order to avoid the individuals who despise him the most, but it didn't really matter. After he arrived home, he was essentially non-existent. Izuku was the black sheep and the outcast of the Yagi family, whereas Izumi was the golden kid. His own family's pariah. He has to heal from all the abuse he endured on difficult days like today or most days, actually. Izumi would tell his parents he picked a fight and got beat up for attention if they happened to see. He received something worse than neglect as a result. Unfair penalty. Poor Izuku noticed a rumbling beneath his feet as he made his way down an underground tunnel. A live pile of muck was spilling out of the sewer when he turned around. He yelled, "Hello, skinsuit," and then sprang at the terrified toddler. Izuku was trapped in the villain's body when he attempted to escape. Izuku attempted to scream, but the villain was manipulating his body like a puppet by getting into his mouth. "Nothing personal, bud. I just need a disguise to help me skip town. Thanks for being so charitable." Izuku felt himself growing weaker and dropped his notebook. "Is this it? Am I truly going to die like this? All I can hope for is that you won't be too let down. Dad." His consciousness dwindled as he prepared to die. "Grandma." Something stopped the sludge monster from pushing further into Izuku's body. Despite the fact that the child had gone limp, he could sense something pulling back. The villain experienced an unexplained chill as the force pushed back stronger. "What the devil is this?" That voice made the sludge man shudder. "Where are you, villain? You can't evade the long arm of justice forever. There isn't enough time for me to dominate this brat. Oh well, you worthless runt, thanks for nothing." In a flash, he pushed himself away from the youngster and went back into the sewer. When he managed to get away, a massive mass of muscles arrived to discover the boy unconscious. Ake up. Hey, Izuku's eyes roared to life. When he looked up, he saw his idol's famous smile. Izuku exclaimed, "Welcome back to the living, my boy." Before he instantly shuffled backward to keep a comfortable distance, he stammered, might, too stunned to comprehend what he was seeing. "The one and only, apologies, young Izuku. But I've been chasing that dastardly villain all day. I'm sorry I allowed him to cause you harm. You wouldn't be able to tell me where he went, would you?" Izuku regained his composure and shook eyebrows. "Sorry. I blacked out after he started taking over my body." All Might's grin remained unwavering. All Might lunged, preparing to take off. "No sweat, kid. You did your best, and you get live to see another day. Ha ha ha. Now then, if you'll excuse me," she said. He was called to wait, please, by Izuku. "I have to ask. Can I become a hero even without a quirk?" Heartache. A sense that Izuku Yagi is the most knowledgeable. It was heightened now, though, to a level he had never experienced before. Like everyone else, he questioned his favorite hero, his idol, if it was feasible. Without power, some villains are unbeatable. If you don't have a quirk, you will die. Avoid giving your family any cause for concern. As he trudged home, tears streamed down his face. His expression was one of misery, agony, and indifference. He wouldn't fight back if he encountered any more villains. He arrived at his family's spacious home at last. He went straight to the family members that didn't treat him like a punching bag or a burden when he first arrived. "Hello, Dad and Grandma. It was a difficult day. Ruger than normal. I'm not sure I can handle this any longer." As he concluded his plea, a last tear fell to the ground. "Please continue to watch over me." He passed Inko making dinner in the kitchen on his way to his room. Well, she had the day off. Izuku felt obliged to try to speak with her, but he wasn't sure why. For the first time in years, discuss his day with him. He walked to the kitchen, his eyes nearly empty of hope. "Hi Mom." Inko didn't notice him since she was too busy chopping veggies. When Inko said, "My day was horrible, almost died," she paused her work to gaze at Izuku. She screamed at her son, but she didn't see him as such. "What, don't just come here and make jokes like that. You know how I feel about the topic of death." Izuku said to himself, "I don't know what I was thinking." That infuriated Inko the most. Izuku dragged his feet, wishing he hadn't said anything, wishing he hadn't given her the opportunity to be his mother. "Don't tell me you were making trouble for yourself again. Go upstairs," he yelled. He arrived at his room, if that's what the ill-insulated attic could be called. The winters were bitterly cold, while the summers were oppressively hot. He made an effort to keep the relatively bare wood clean, but dust usually accumulated here. He dropped his backpack and landed on the floor's mattress. "Why must I put up with this? How could I have earned this? Be born? Why is no one telling me? I can't continue in this manner." Izuku noticed his charred notebook was missing from his backpack when he got out of his old mattress. Grabbing it, he turned to the first page. All Might's autograph. It just seemed like it could get worse. He was about to discard it after tearing off the page. However, he noticed something. A writing instrument. He had an idea. He wasn't prepared to end his life, but he had to leave this house where he was surrounded by hateful people. Izuku dismissed the idea as foolish and shook his head. He changed into more relaxed attire and headed to supper. Izuku volunteered to do the dishwashing while Inko, Toshinori, and Izumi were seated at the dinner table. It was repeating the same scene. The Yagi family is seated at the table, smiling, talking, and spending time together. Izuku, however, is never present at that table. Even if he couldn't cure whatever was wrong, he hopes he at least knew why. The icy void in his gut and heart reappeared after he was done. He had enough money to eat at a restaurant down the street. Even though it's not the healthiest food, ramen is still preferable to going to bed hungry, once more. He thought about what to do as he climbed the stairs and sat in his room. I must know. Izumi and Dad, but I've already tried Mom. Please don't let me down. Izumi and Izuku used to share a bedroom, and Izuku knocked on the door. An unpleasant look met him. What? She questioned angrily. He only said, "What did I do?" Which confused her. What are you talking about? Why do you hate me? What did I ever do? We're twins, but you can hardly look at me. Why, Izumi? Izuku's eyes begged for an honest response. Izumi let out a sigh. She shut the door in his face and said, "You were born." Izuku refrained from crying. To tell the truth, he had anticipated that. Every time he attempts to re-establish a relationship with his sister, something occurs. A heartless denial. Izuku went to reheat a container of leftovers in the kitchen. He located Toshinori when that was warming up. Toshinori sighed and said, "Dad, I need to ask you something important." Izuku refused to back down as he usually does, saying, "Can't it wait, Izuku? I've had a stressful day." Toshinori hesitated as Izuku's remarks brought back unpleasant memories. "Why do you favor Izumi over me? You and Mom. Why do you treat me like you'd rather not have me? Go," he murmured icily. "I'm not in the mood for this right now. We'll talk later. Always afterward." As he returned to the stairs, Izuku's hair obscured his eyes. Nothing else was to be said. His family provided him with all the information he required to make an informed choice. This isn't the place for me. Izuku had his rucksack draped over his shoulders and was dressed in red shoes, black leggings, and a green hoodie. Little photos of his heroic grandmother and biological father were in his pocket. "I tried everything to mend our relationship, even though I know that running is wrong. They obviously don't want that, though." A burned autograph of All Might was taped to the structural beam above his mattress, and his books were scattered over the room. "They don't want me." He took out his phone's SIM card and threw it in the garbage. Entering the kitchen, he took the leftovers from the microwave. He made one final turn back as he approached the door. Together, the Yagi family was viewing a film. Once more, he was invisible. Goodbye. Musudafu's streets. Izuku has no idea how many turns he took, how far he traveled, or which way he was going. Simply put, he was lost. He returned to the tunnel where the evil had assaulted him inexplicably. Where he nearly lost his life. He simply collapsed to his knees and sobbed. His heart was crying quietly, without whimpering. This is for the best. I was never family in the first place. Long ago, my family passed away. That aloofness reappeared. He was unaware of a light gradually enveloping his body because his eyes were closed. However, someone did. Izuku recoiled at the voice behind him. "Far from home, ain't ya, kid?" Izuku was perplexed by his statement and chose to open his eyes. "You know, you shouldn't be walking around like a nightlight. That could attract the wrong crowd." When he realized that green flames was consuming his entire body, they exploded. "Is this my peculiarity? Burning, similar to Dad. Dad, however, had orange fire. I'm also not attractive. I'm not being burned by it. Why?" Izuku returned his focus to the criminal brandishing a blade. Izuku turned back to the offender and said, "I'm going to make this simple, kid. Hand over her stuff, and you live." "No?" The man gave a small laugh. "Kid, those flames of yours don't burn anything. You're literally on fire, and there's no smoke or anything. Now hand over your shit, or I can set up a ransom for your folks to get you back." Izuku lowered his gaze. As the criminal began to look angry, he got up and said, "Sorry to disappoint, but no one would want me back. You're wasting your time." Then he swung the knife at Izuku and said, "Fine then, I'll kill you and take your shit." The child defended himself by placing his hands in front of him while his eyes grew wide. Unknowingly, he shot the culprit a burst of icy green flames. He wasn't hurt, but it blew him back. What about flames that don't burn? What a perfect quirk for a worthless individual, not much more than a paper tiger. Hey, Deku. Hold on. Why does he no longer charge? When the innocuous flames burst, Izuku's assailant lay on the ground, trembling. What the fuck? Why am I becoming cold? By Runt and his feeble fire. Even when they're not freezing, why is my body not paying attention? The criminal dropped his knife and staggered to his feet. Izuku examined the situation. He looks fearful. Although he was not physically impacted by my power, his mental state suffered. The assailant pulled up his knife and prepared to charge once more. D-damn Runt. I'll kill you. He made another, slower charge. It was as though he was making his body move against its will. Izuku was sufficiently energized to retaliate. It's time to see what I can accomplish. Izuku blasted 2 pillars of green fire from his palms after throwing his hands behind him. He shot like a blazing javelin at his assailant. He delivered his most powerful blast of flames to date after cocking his hand back and decking the thug squarely in the gut. After coughing blood in his mouth and being blown to the opposite side of the tunnel, the guy passed out. Izuku's breathing became labored as a result of the strength he was using. It will require some acclimatization. The flames that covered him were extinguished as he calmed down. I have a peculiarity. What a time for it to appear. People are afraid of cold flames. It could work. With such a peculiarity, I could. He relived the day's events in his mind. He could return to the Yagi family, but would he truly want to be a member of their clan? Izuku went to check the punk and shook his head. He dropped a few items while unconscious. Money, a silver metal respirator, his knife, his phone, white hair dye, and a restaurant ticket good for 2 complimentary drinks. It came down to one question after Izuku argued with himself about whether or not he should accept this. A gutter punk or a kid on the Runa who needed it more? Despite his lack of pride, Izuku gathered up everything valuable. The boy heard a policeman yell, "What's going on here?" and ran off. He ignited his feet, rushed to the other end of the tunnel, and took off into the night. The punk was unconscious and encircled by lingering green flames when the police discovered him. They blazed even after he attempted to stomp them out. He attempted to douse them with water. They continued to burn. His iced coffee was sacrificed. The same outcome. He put his hand into the fire, even though it seemed foolish. A chill went up his spine, and he pulled it back. Shouldering green flames? It's a novel one. Such a peculiarity does not exist in our database. The job isn't heroic, but could it be? As the culprit was taken away, the fire was extinguished. The policeman concluded, a vigilante. In the meantime in the metropolis, Izuku was leaping from rooftop to rooftop, barely perceptible in the dazzling evening lights. He landed with a fall on a rooftop after using his quirk's propulsion to make leaps and landings simple. He was able to catch his breath at last. He examined his hands. Green flames flared up in his palms, and he said, "I'm still alive. I have a quirk." He recalled his previous usage of it. That was the closest he had ever gotten to true heroism. I don't have a license. I didn't have the authority to stop that guy. But, a criminal was arrested thanks to my actions. Izuku strolled to the rooftop's edge and gazed out over the city. Izuku dug inside his backpack and took out his burned notebook, saying, "What I did wasn't within the rules, but it was the right thing. I was attacked twice today. And the second time made me feel like I did something good." He recalled pondering which hero to catalog. Let's do something different. Not a villain or a hero, the watchdog. After donning the respirator, Izuku strolled around the city. I'll do everything in my power to help people, even if they never see me as a hero. And I'm not going to let anyone stop me this time. Izuku 13 years old, no affiliation, strangeness, psycho flames. Childhood 10 years ago, Izuku along with his pals. Izuku was in the back of Kachan and Izumi's buddies as they paraded through the woodland. Izumi was lifting Kachan into the air as he detonated an explosion that resembled a floating sparkler. Izumi lost her balance and concentration while crossing a log over the creek, and she and the blonde plunged into the water. Despite their friends' worries, they dismissed it. Playfully, Kachan teasingly said, "You idiot, watch where you're going." To Izumi. She retorted, "I lost focus because of your loud explosions." A hand extended to assist them, interrupting their lighthearted conversation. The weakest person in their group extended the hand. The expression in his eyes and the gesture he made said, "Are you guys okay? I was worried you got hurt bad. Concerned about us? As though we are weaklings. Like him. Being kind to these ingrates who didn't deserve it." Izuku Yagi had to learn how to block a hit for the first time. Now Izuku had gone back to the same forest where he and his boyhood pals used to play. It was an enjoyable environment with pleasant memories at first. Later, it left him feeling empty and hollow. As if he was unwelcome and never intended to be there. He is now a little enraged by it, recalling the unjustified insults he endured. He ventured farther into the forest, past the brook, in search of a quiet spot to discover his peculiarity. Grabbing a stick, he lit it on fire. No heat, no smoke. The stick continues to burn even after he throws it into a puddle. Fires that don't burn but have an impact on a person's mood. Like a cross between Mo and Dad. The peculiarities of Inko. Can I manage the fires, then? Izuku set his notebook aside and held up his hand to the stick. The stick emitted a green flame. Izuku repositioned it and squeezed his fist to extinguish it. Pyrokinesis. Because I can reuse the fires I've started, the stamina disadvantage is almost non-existent. In order to practice, Izuku made big waves of flames and guided them in a zigzag pattern past the trees, returning to himself after circling. It turns out that he could refuel by absorbing the flames into his body. He started to have a headache after doing this for long, which was the result of overusing the pyrokinesis. But that was resolved after drinking a cup of water. Then Izuku set fire to his feet and launched himself into the air. Although it was a little unsteady, he rapidly mastered flying. He moved fluidly and guided himself with his hands. Even Kachan and Izumi struggled to learn how to fly this fast. Izuku's cheerful disposition abruptly stopped. He came to a halt and simply hung there, his eyes sad. I mean, Yagi and Bakugo. Izuku walked carefully down to his belongings. He needed to try another move. He pounded a tree as his fist was covered in green flames. His fist was little affected, but he felt the impact. He hit the tree more forcefully and intensified the flames. The tree made contact even though he didn't feel his fist. These flames are dense, qualities that are defensive. Izuku put his palm to his face in an attempt to test the theory. Breathing was hard, but he discovered that he was not susceptible to the chilly feeling he gives other people. These chilly flames are denser the brighter they burn, but his endurance wanes more quickly. He can passively maintain the flames he's led to burn, but these debilitating fires require more attention and effort. This could be useful for my capture maneuvers. Cold flames are awesome, man. I wish I had received it sooner. However, Izuku shook his head, saying, but then, I'd still be with them, and their conditional love. I never considered them family. I no longer need them to hold me back. I need to concentrate on strengthening myself. I have an easy trial run, but I'll be dead if I grow arrogant. Izuku threw aside idle thoughts and devoted the entire day to his flames. Sunset was upon him before he knew it. He flew into the city after donning a hoodie to conceal his hair and a metal respirator to conceal his lower face. I'm still green. Nothing major, perhaps some men from the alley. The Musutafu Izuku was patrolling the city from rooftops to streets, trying to minimize his usage of his conspicuous peculiarity or blend in as much as possible. He was thinking about going to bed at around 10 o'clock when he heard a glass bottle shatter. When he went to look, he discovered two punks from the alleys carrying purses, most likely stolen. One with a red beanie exclaimed, "Not a bad haul, bro. We'll be eating good tonight." One in a dark green overcoat exclaimed, "You got that right. Burgers, booze, maybe some stripper ass to finish it off." All Izuku wanted to hear was that. He raised his voice, "Pardon me." A short, hooded figure caught the criminal's attention. The two of them grinned and asked, "Am I right in assuming that doesn't belong to you?" "Yeah, so what, go play hero somewhere else, brat?" Izuku approached them slowly. The thief with the beanie simply shrugged. "Nobody will see us this far down the alley." He blasted orange flames with his in. "So long, rug rat," Izuku said as a cloud of flame engulfed him. The overcoat thug exclaimed, "Poor kid, dying like a hero." Peeved. "Oh, who am I kidding, he was nothing." They were ready to turn to go when they heard a voice. They turned to see the burglars fire against the walls and the youngster encircled by a pillar of bright green flames, saying, "We're not done yet." In order to fire at the two, the vigilante set fire to his back. Also, who said I'm a hero? It appeared as though a monster was pursuing them, and they were unable to process it in time. He kicked one against the wall and uppercut the other off his feet. They were obviously scared, but they didn't tumble as easy as the first one. "Fuck you." Izuku attempted to flee as another blast of flames was directed at him. They were far slower than they ought to have been. Izuku flew into the air, determined to cut the robbers off before they could escape, despite being physically unaffected by the flames. They reached a trash can nearby, but were stopped by a wall of blazing flames. Hovering over them, Izuku questioned, "Are these yours?" Their hearts were truly frightened by him. He flew down at the street thugs after drawing both of his fists back to his sides. They would be plagued by the image of the green devil flying in their direction for a very long time. The two were rendered unconscious by Izuku's two condensed fire fists. He surprised himself by how much he exhaled as he landed. I can also control other flames, even when they come from a human. Whoa, it's something, even though I couldn't control everything. He sensed something as he attempted to extinguish the flames. The cravings for sick sensations, avarice, and indifference to others. The thug's flames radiated those emotions. Izuku can tell how someone is feeling by the heat they give off. It's easier when they're hotter. When he understood what terrible individuals were lying in front of him, his positive attitude was shut down. After making sure the jerks were restrained, he prepared to call the police using one of their phones. However, he noticed something. Beneath the garbage can, he discovered a hatch. It led to a staircase that opened onto a tiny chamber brimming with pilfered items. Izuku contemplated, but then recalled that he needed materials to continue his work. He only brought food, water, a first aid kit, and a few thousand yen. He looted for a few minutes before phoning the police. He then left the criminal's hiding place uncovered. The dark green overcoat on the other's back was the final item he stole before departing. Izuku deliberately left lingering green flames on the pavement as he walked off into the darkness, resembling an artist signing his creation. When the police arrived, they were able to track the cell phone. They discovered an underground bunker and two goons who were unconscious. As he pulled the two away, one police officer said, "Oh my god, it's the super criminal bros. We've been hunting them for a year now. Who could have done this?" On a surface that shouldn't be able to hold fire, his partner gazed at the familiar green flames. Again, our vigilante friend. In the meantime, after jumping over the rooftops, Izuku landed on a skyscraper's ledge, where he was out of sight of the windows. I stole from thieves. 2 wrongs are not equal to 1 right. As he examined his pilfered treasure, Izuku reprimanded himself. His survival instincts informed him that this was necessary, but his good nature told him that it was wrong. The only person he has is himself. He already knows that no one is there to support or watch out for him. Izuku sighed and pulled out some takoyaki to eat. Heroes are compensated for saving lives and apprehending criminals. I suppose this is what I get for being a vigilante. Izuku finished his breakfast and took a glance at the green overcoat. His large, yellow backpack would have to be his pillow and his blanket. To be honest, he was a little excited about the following morning. Nobody would be able to beat him. Izuku took out 2 small photos of his family from his sweatshirt before falling asleep. Good night, Dad. Good night, Grandma. The following day, after a dull school day, Izumi and Bakugo were making their way home on foot. The blonde with the spikes was asked by Izumi, "Do you think something was missing today?" "Yeah, I didn't feel like I was asserting my dominance enough today," Katsuki replied. In contemplation, they both scratched their heads. Izumi realized, "That's it. We didn't say hi to Deku." Bakugo waved goodbye to his accomplice. "Oh yeah. Come to think of it, when was the last time we saw the damn nerd? Fuck it, who cares? Tell him I said he's worthless scum." Izumi walked up to the attic as soon as she came home. Knock knock crash. She sent the hatch flying off its hinges with her telekinesis. Sorry. How recently was this location maintained? When she flew up, she spotted schoolbooks on the floor and the attic dirty from no one cleaning it. There was no one to respond to her question. "Geez, Deku, when's the last time you cleaned up here?" She became irate at the lack of response and said, "Hey, I'm talking. Where the hell are you?" Until she noticed a message signed by All Might. "What is this?" When she saw what was on the other side, her eyes grew wide. When Inko and Toshinori got home, the latter switched on the news to see the latest developments on a concerning subject. They discovered their daughter slumped on the couch, her face crushed. "Izumi, dear, what's wrong?" Izumi took a moment to respond. "It's an odd question. Mom, Dad, when was the last time you saw Izuku?" However, it took them a worryingly long time to consider. Izumi held up a slightly burned piece of paper signed by All Might before they could respond. "I apologize, but I'm at my breaking point. I didn't intend to be a burden, and I didn't beg to be born this way. I'd like to know why you despise me so much, but I suppose that's asking for too much. You don't need to worry, though. I won't be a burden to anyone else, I won't be missed, and you won't have to cope with me. It benefits both parties. Yagi's, goodbye." Izuku. Deku. What they had just read had utterly destroyed the family. Since he took his bag with him, Izumi attested that it wasn't a suicide note, yet the fact remains. Izuku fled. They shoved him away. Breaking information. The Green Fire Vigilante has struck again, capturing 2 criminals that have been on the wanted list for a year. The criminals awoke with a fright and refused to say anything about their attacker. All the police learned is that he is a brutal outlaw with no restraint, unlike our heroes. He is suspected to be armed and dangerous, wielding cold, green flames that don't go out for some time. First sighting of his strange quirk was in Musutafu near Aldera Middle School. They felt their hearts sink to the bottom. The vigilante was in the same vicinity as Izuku, who was out there alone and vulnerable. Inko sobbed after seeing flashbacks to the death of her previous spouse. Azumi's broken-hearted appearance persisted. The idea of his eccentric son being left to fend for himself on the street like he had to made Toshinori's blood run cold. They had no idea that their presumptions were completely incorrect. In other places, a dark figure has just completed watching the news while seated in a chair surrounded by medical equipment. He smiled broadly as he considered the potential utility of the vigilante. My. This vigilante has an interesting quirk. Igniting the flame of fear into others, and in just 2 nights, he's made the news. I'm impressed, child. Day 5. I've been a vigilante for a while now, having awakened my quirk and abandoned the Yagis. Every day, I learn more about myself and try to help others as much as I can. They can't dispute that my activities are beneficial, but I feel a little bad about disobeying the hero's rules. Izuku concealed his notepad under an air conditioner and placed it in his bag. He planned to spend the day strolling around town like a typical child, dressed in green shorts and a black shirt. He wore a face mask and a cap that allowed tufts of green and black hair to dangle over his eyebrows since, of course, he couldn't risk being recognized. He fit right in with the populace. For someone who didn't want to be identified, it was fortunate that there weren't many on the streets. He visited a playground and observed the children having fun. It was an essential time. He observed kids having fun, playing together, and running around. As he left, he reflected seriously, I wish I had a better memory of this place. He noticed something intriguing on one of the lampposts. A poster of a missing individual with his face. Izuku felt conflicted about this. Are they concerned about me? Do they care now that I've been gone for days? Most likely. The school informed them. Izuku went for the paper and tore out the kanji for Yagi next to his name, saying, I never had a place in that house. Izuku simply strolled aimlessly after that contradictory experience, relishing the moment of calm. Not many police officers or heroes were on patrol. Excellent. He doesn't need to be concerned about getting away quickly. Like everyone else, he was going about his daily business when he noticed something. 2 boys are following a girl. She was trying to lose them, judging by her pace, but they weren't picking up on it. As someone who had been used to observing, Izuku watched from out of sight. He kept up with the 3 until the girl made a vain attempt to yank them away. The girl fired extending aux wires from her earlobes, and Izuku watched in wonder. However, his fascination changed to rage when the cords got entangled in one of the guy's hands and they both laughed. For an instant, the only sound he could hear were the mocking voices that he still hears now. What a pathetic weakling, could you be any lamer? What can you even do, huh? Just a waste of space. He turned to face the girl again and saw the sadness in her eyes as she endured the bullying. He lost control as he witnessed her quietly wallowing in her frailty. He exploded out of his hiding location without thinking or planning. As he stood above the jerk clutching the girl's ears and prepared to strike with both fists clasped together, his body moved on its own. Thwack. Letting go of his ears, the jerk collapsed to the ground, senseless, his neck bruised. What the? A hard kick to the chin quickly dispatched the other. Blood was streaming from his mouth as he landed with a thump. He was pinned by the aggressive newcomer who stood above him and put his foot on his shoulder. In addition to his angry emerald eyes, he was made more menacing by the light bags under them. One bone-chilling word came out of his mouth. Leave. The green monster left his companion vulnerable after the small bastard wriggled out from beneath Izuku's foot and fled. Izuku turned to see the girl looked astonished and a little scared. Izuku responded, sorry, and turned to go. The girl yelled, wait, at him. When he was battling, his cap fell off, and she held it out. After a brief moment of terror, Izuku recalled that he had applied a small amount of white hair dye to his green highlights. He was afraid to destroy the black hair that reminded him of his grandmother and his late father. He retrieved his hat and replaced it. Thanks, a lot, F for what you did, the girl with the purple hair said. Izuku noticed that she was averting his gaze. At the conclusion, he snarled a little and said, no problem. Sorry I went so far. I just have a zero-tolerance policy on bullies. The girl gave a small smile. Her choice of words infuriated Izuku, who said, that's pretty hero of you. His shoulders were slumped as he uttered, I'm no hero, that's what they all say. Just as the girl opened her mouth to speak, a sound interrupted her. Hiss. The sound of a bus leaving close. She clenched her hand violently, saying, "Damn it. I missed the bus thanks to these idiots." Izuku reflected on the occasions when his parents forgot him and he missed a ride. The thought of someone being abandoned without cause was intolerable to him. Damn, what's the matter with me? Izuku tightened his jaw. He gestured to his back while bending down. With little choice, the girl got on the unknown boy's back and put her arms around his neck, saying, come on, before the bus gets too far. Whatever you do, don't look down. Wah. Whoosh. She and Izuku bounded into the air, the former squeezing the boy's arms, legs, and earlobes. What the heck, man? A warning would have been nice, she said. She said nothing further. Would you have gone through with it if I said we were going to fly? For a few minutes, they followed the bus she missed until the girl was certain she could make the remaining distance on foot. She was shaking when Izuku let her go, and he had to grab her before she collapsed. The words, "FF flying is terrifying," came out of her mouth. Izuku gently placed her on the concrete and stroked the back of his hand. He was ready to go when the girl yelled out to him, "It's scary the first time, but you get used to it." Well, bye. Izuku froze and asked, "Hey, what's your name?" Due to missing person posters and the fact that he is no longer a member of that family, he was unable to give her his entire name. However, he hadn't really considered his course of action in this circumstance. He had to say something, though. He said, "Zizu. My name is Zu." The girl with the purple hair wanted to inquire as to if that was a nickname or something, but she refrained. When she asked, she sensed a little panic in his heart and chose to leave him alone. "May I ask what your name is?" "Kyoka." Feeling a little lighter, Izuku returned to leaping over the roofs. She was a kind young woman. Why she would be a target for bullying is beyond me. As he was jumping from roof to roof, he noticed something in the distance and hoped that I had given them some sense. Smoke. He went right away to assess the issue. Just a few minutes before, so Deku really ran away? And he's been gone for almost a week? Katsuki inquired. Katsuki clenched his fist and said, "Yeah, and I'm starting to worry. What if he runs into that green fire vigilante? He could get killed. Damn you, Deku, for worrying about your frail ass. How self-centered of you to pull such a stunt. Get over your pouting and come out." In an explosion, Katsuki destroyed his drink can and threw it away. "If the nerd dies, I'll kill him." The two of them were unaware of it at first, but behind them a pile of foul-smelling muck was accumulating. Well, aren't you a powerful skin puppet? Now Izuku arrived at a retail center and hid beneath a roof-mounted air conditioner. Backdraft was putting out the fires he saw raging out of control. Despite his best efforts, Kamui Woods was unable to save the civilians caught in the crossfire because of the fires. Although Mount Lady had arrived, she was already on guard for property damage because the pass was too narrow for her. Attacks by death arms on the villain had no effect. "Monster! How dare you take a child hostage?" he shouted. Izuku turned to face the bad guy who was doing this. "The filthy jerk who nearly murdered me. All Might was hunting him down, wasn't it? And he's holding a child hostage." Boom. Bo. Hurrah! Izuku heard explosions, and his ears perked up. No. He heard the prisoner yelling obscenities to be let go. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with. I'm gonna send you back to whatever sewer you crawled out, you living shit. Get the fuck off me." That harsh tone. "Oh, you must be joking with me. Bakugo." Izuku was contemplating whether or not to intervene. He harbors a slight resentment for the slime villain, and the heroes are doing nothing. However, the heroes would most likely attempt to arrest Bakugo right away because he is a jerk. Izuku noticed a familiar head with black and green hair as he turned to face the throng. Izumi, his twin sister, appeared to be organizing something. "Please, no." She attempted to telekinesis Bakugo out as she suddenly sailed over the throng and the flames. As she touched down a few steps from him, she cried out, "I'll save you, Kachan." Izuku muttered, "You idiot," to himself. The villain was able to control the stray chunk of mud that Izumi landed on. Sludge had chained the fool from her legs and was slowly moving up her body. She complained, "God, this is disgusting." "I fucking know," exclaimed Katsuki. This was hilarious to the sludge villain. "Ha ha ha. Hold on, girly. Once I've taken over your friend, I'll be sure to have some fun with you." A blond man in the crowd was cursing his inability to accomplish anything. His physique was incapable of doing another assignment because he had been working like a hero and lost sleep while searching for his missing son. Now that two youngsters were at the villain's mercy and there was nothing the heroes could do to rescue, they felt totally worthless. An irritated green-haired bystander was pounding his head on the air conditioner. Two idiots are in trouble. Heroes aren't even trying, and I'm probably the only one who can help. My goodness, damn it. Izuku lifted his palm toward the flames while standing on the roof's edge. Another emotional presence struck him. Each flame has a tale to tell, and Bakugo's quirk created these flames that conveyed his fear. Izuku gave his bully one more glance and noticed the boy's horrified expression. When he saw those flaming eyes pleading to be saved, he made up his mind. My sentiments are irrelevant. I'm going to save this guy who's in trouble. Izuku held up both hands. The orange flames that were obstructing the heroes suddenly surged up before going cool and smokeless. They were perplexed until they turned green. Then, the flames approached the villain and entered his mouth. What the fuck is this? As Katsuki began to lose consciousness, he thought. Izumi watched in awe as the villain was penetrated by the green fires. It's time to get your own medicine. Izuku balled both of his hands into fists after the majority of the flames had been swallowed by the sludge. Bakugo fell into Izumi as the living slime burst into a huge explosion of green flames. They were both secure. The audience watched in wonder. Green flames? Whose quirk was that? What just happened? Why is it so cold all of a sudden? The blond man pondered as the paramedics and cops arrived. Green flames without a flame. The vigilante. My daughter was just saved by him. Where is he? He was leaping into the sunset already. He didn't feel very good about saving two lives. Yagi, Bakugo. Don't let me regret what I did for you, please. Afterwards Toshinori drove Katsuki and Izumi home while they sat silently in his car. Bakugo simply huffed, not feeling like receiving praise for once. I saw the fight you put up, Katsuki. You held your ground well, even the pros were impressed by your fighting spirit. And Izumi, you showed incredible spirit rushing into harm's way like that. But you need to learn to analyze your situation and make the best decision. Izumi gave a wink. Analyze? Izuku was far more adept at that. I'm no fan of the vigilante that saved you, but once he's captured, I'd like to have a word with him. Toshi replied. Katsuki was dropped off first. The blonde waved over his shoulder. Later, Uncle Toshi. There was a tight quiet between Izumi and Toshi in the automobile. Toshinori clutched his steering wheel and asked, Dad, do you think the vigilante might have seen Izuku? It's possible. At least he doesn't seem to be the type to act without reason. But it's still against the law. We'll find Izuku, and this outlaw. The next night Izuku was ablaze with viridescent flames, dressed in a dark green hoodie, black jeans, red sneakers, and a metal respirator. He was perched on the side of a towering building when he noticed a car speeding past stop signs and traffic lights. He slipped on his hoodie and lower facial armor and followed the automobile, thinking, looks like it's going to be another late night. In the meantime the motorist exclaimed, out of the way, shitheads. As he almost collided with some pedestrians, you sure we got everything from that hardware store? He asked his buddy. A green light landed on the bonnet of their automobile, interrupting him as he said, oh yeah, the big man's gonna be thrilled. With this, he'll be able to what the fuck. They swerved from side to side, attempting to shake off their car, but he refused to move. Oh shit, it's him, they exclaimed. He grabbed the steering wheel and smashed a hole in the windshield with a blazing fist. The vehicle veered so violently that it overturned on its side and struck a brick wall. Before the collision, the vigilante sprang off and observed the crooks attempting to escape. They had a bag of stolen loot, but they were bleeding from the head and most likely had concussions. He taunted, who taught you how to drive? In front of their smoking and totaled automobile, the thugs noticed a living fire in the form of a human. You bastard! They screamed, grabbing guns and firing at the youngster. The shots struck the car many times after passing straight through the fire. They were too shaken to see that they were aiming at a chilly heat mirage rather than a human. But when a bullet entered the engine, it was too late. Kaboom! The two offenders were blown away by the blast as the automobile burst into flames. Unable to get back up, they fell to the street. As the world faded away, they heard clapping approaching. He gazed down at them with emotionless, icy eyes and said, thank you. I couldn't produce the heat necessary to explode your car, so I appreciate you shooting at it enough to do the job for me. You. Bah. Tard. Izuku peered into their luggage as they passed out. Steel pipes and metal plating. It appeared to be armored supplemental material. The pipes implied that it was for a sick person. This is most likely going to some crime boss if it was being hauled by criminals. He grabbed one of the thieves' phones and made an emergency call, saying, "Not tonight." They would be alerted by the sound of raging flames, so he remained silent. Izuku saw something intriguing before he departed. Plates of malleable black metal. He examined his flaming crimson sneakers. Before taking off, he left behind lingering green flames, saying, "I think I've earned myself a gear upgrade." Police showed up shortly after he fled, carrying Teleki, the number 32 hero. Teleki grimaced as she saw the green flames blazing cold next to the unconscious goons, asking, "What the bloody hell happened here?" He happened. A thug regaining consciousness caught her attention. Weakly, he murmured, "Wah. Where is that guy? I'll kill him." Teleki's telekinetic grip drew him in. As the police tried to calm her down, she inquired quickly, "What happened here? What were you taking? Where is the vigilante?" There was scarcely any intimidation of the culprit. A heroine barely fazed him after being exposed to his bone-chilling heat. "Listen, hero. Between that monster and my boss, you're the least of my worries. If you're after that little bastard, you better be prepared for a cold day in hell. That guy's a pint-sized devil." Inko was aware that the terrified thief would not be able to provide him with any further information. He was definitely salty, but he didn't even appear overly upset about going to jail. It was preferable than having to disappoint his boss and possibly encounter the Green Devil once more. Inko tightened her jaw. One other witness was too terrified of the vigilante to provide any helpful details. She will eventually come across this threat who believes he can do anything he wants. In the meantime, Izuku gripped his chest tightly. Unusual. What's causing this burning? As he examined the pliable black metal plates he had taken, he disregarded it. "I'm going for a dark hero look, but my shoes are too bright for that." He shaped the plates to fit tightly around his shoes, exposing only the red laces, saying, "These should help with that, and give me better protection and harder hits." He turned to face the smoke where the authorities had been drawn to his small-scale altercation. "Perhaps I was a bit too ostentatious this time. Oh well." In other places with Teleki there, a dark figure watched the news about the recently dubbed Green Devil striking once more. "My, I wasn't expecting you to make such a splash, child. I hope you enjoy the gift I left you. It was a good use of those street urchins. The components I need arrived the other day. I'm just thankful you didn't intercept that one. It's a shame Teleki wasn't able to catch up to you fast enough. Poor dear has been working herself ragged, taking her guilt out on criminals instead of herself." The figure gave a gloomy smile. "I can't wait for your family reunion. I'll be watching." The morning in Musutafu was beautiful. The sun was starting to rise and drive out the night's darkness. The birds were chirping, and the Green Devil was soaking a criminal in icy heat while holding him by the neck. A typical morning. The sun was rising when he lowered the offender, signaling to him that the night shift was finished. "Oh no, already? Oh well." Izuku wore a short-sleeved hoodie, black shorts, a face mask, and a black compression shirt so he could move freely among the population. He took out 3 items from his rucksack before he left: his journal, his family photos, and his journal. Day 15. I keep fighting any bad man that comes my way and try to make folks sleep better at night. I recently assisted Bakugo and Yagi, and ever since then, I've been experiencing an uncomfortable burning sensation in my chest. I'm hoping that's not a clue. He prayed to his departed family members while tucking his notebook into his backpack. Another day to live. Izuku wandered the streets without speaking to anyone. He reflected on how things had changed since 2 weeks prior. Even if he sleeps on roofs, at least he no longer cries himself to sleep. Although he is frequently targeted by heroes, he is hardly new to the necessity to flee from people. Additionally, he is able to feed himself better than the Yagi family did because of the money he steals from the criminals he beats. They're not here to harm him, which is the best part. He saw another missing person poster at the local library where he was walking. So why does thinking about them make me feel so hot? In an attempt to decompress, he chose to read a little. He always felt at ease in the library while he was in middle school. It served as a sanctuary for several days as bullies tried to destroy his life. Probably the only person he developed a relatively good rapport with in the entire school was the librarian. He assisted her in returning the books to the shelves on certain afternoons. Hefty, thick books. It was an exercise that helped him gain a little muscle and not become totally weak. Not at all like Katsuki, at least not in those days. However, what about right now? He shrugged it off and searched for a nice book to read. Damn, there's that burning again. He hasn't needed to cure wounds in a long time, but maybe he should brush up on it. He heard a voice moaning too loudly for a library as he was perusing. She groaned, "This is Heal." Izuku proceeded to look into it. "Just kill me, it'd be easier at this point." He has developed the habit of investigating circumstances that catch his attention. He discovered a girl with pink skin examining a stack of textbooks. Studying during summer vacation? See, can I ask what you're doing? Izuku approached the two and inquired. The pink girl shared his bushy hair and had golden pupils on a black sclera. A peculiarity of mutation. Her eyes and body language conveyed fatigue as she gazed at him. Writing my will, said Pinky. Beneath the mask, Izuku grinned slightly. This time, she truly replied, studying. Izuku's head cocked. During the summer, am I missing something? The girl clarified that she had pretended to be ill 3 weeks prior to finals in order to avoid taking tests in her weakest subjects. She eventually had to write the papers over summer break after her parents and the school learned the truth. Pinky complained, my parents left me here to study the whole day, she said. She yelled, this is cruel and unusual punishment. I want a lawyer, but was silenced by a librarian. Izuku grinned a little wider. He noticed from looking at the textbooks that she was teaching English, history, and math. He whispered, I do well in all of these. Really? She exclaimed, startled. The pink girl asked, could you tutor me? Please. I've only got 3 days to get through all this. Izuku was surprised. Tutor you? Despite his constant academic success, no one ever requested him to assist them with their studies. When he offered, even the lowest members in the class rejected him. They would sooner fail than seek Deku's assistance. The theft of his notes was the worst. The sight of the pink-skinned girl kneeling before him snapped him out of his resentful reverie. Please help me, I'm begging you, there's no one else. You're my only hope. To encourage her to stop, Izuku extended his hands. Pinky leapt back up and grabbed his hands, shaking them vigorously. All right, I'll help you. You don't have to beg, now please get up. People were staring. After giving a small laugh, Izuku said, thank you. You're a lifesaver, and walked to a chair. Izuku grinned and said, I'm Mina Ishido, by the way. He started to look for a chair after saying, nice to meet you, but was stopped. What's your name? For a moment, nervousness filled Izuku's gaze. He sped off to find a chair after saying, I'm Zu. The female was raving about how adorable that name was, and he was unaware of it. Lying to those lovely girls had left a hole in his heart. He couldn't return home, run the chance of being reported to the authorities, and experience abuse and neglect once more. He was reminded of yet another motive for his departure. Izuku was never someone anyone liked to be around. Without hesitation, Mina responded, okay, you said you've got 3 days to prepare. We can do one subject each day, and draw up notes to revise each night. How about we start with your worst subject? Math. They studied and took notes for a few hours. In between, they agreed to have a lunch break. They strolled to a local mall's food court. I still can't believe exams during vacation is even legal. Mina sighed. Well, you wouldn't know if you didn't come up with faking sick. Zu said. How was I supposed to know this would happen? Izuku asked her with a smile while wearing his mask and eating a bowl of katsudon. He can't recall the last time he actually spoke with anybody. Thanks for agreeing to tutor me, Zu. I owe you big time, Mina replied. Zu gulped his meal before speaking. The lad blushed as Mina taunted, like what, having a hottie as arm candy? It's okay, I'm actually getting more out of it than you know. Mina gave him a questioning glance. Actually, a normal school experience, she said. He had the slightest smile, which was more depressing than anything else, and said, I've never studied with other people before, so this is a nice change of scene. Who wouldn't want to study with you? You're smart and you make studying not so horrific, replied his companion in pink. Izuku glanced at his plate. The atmosphere around the table was somewhat depressing. Let's just say I'm not the most popular. Screw them, Mina exclaimed, startling the boy with the black and white hair. Zu gazed at the vivacious girl in astonishment, who was entirely certain that she would enjoy his company. They don't know what they're missing. Besides, this just means I have you all to myself, so I ain't complaining. His green eyes glowed with a brilliance he hadn't experienced in a long time, and he felt touched. But he realized she was speaking to Zu, not Izuku, before it could spread. If she understood who he truly was, he has no reason to think she would feel the same way. He forced a smile and closed his eyes. Thanks, I like you too. They strolled back to the library to complete their day's studies when they had finished their dinner and paid. They were saying goodbye to one another at dusk. That night, Izuku felt lighter when he went to sleep. They studied history the following day. Although Zu didn't discuss much about himself after opening up about his own school background, Their study periods were also pleasant times for them to bond. While being amiable and accommodating, he took care to maintain a safe distance from her. They discussed English on the last day. "You're coming along pretty well. Studying isn't so bad, right?" replied Zhu. Mina winked and said, "Not when you have a great teacher." Zhu was glad his blush was hidden by his mask. She gave a lovely pout and said, "I'm almost upset, this has been fun. But it was thanks to my great idea that we came together, and I'm probably going to get better grades than I would without you." "Thanks, Zhu." Mina gasped. Izuku could feel himself getting more at ease. "It's been a pleasure, really." To save time, they chose to complete their studies at the food court and then explore the mall. For the teenagers, window shopping was a delightful and soothing pastime. Izuku was missing out on these experiences as a typical child. He didn't have this even prior to the Vigilante Act. Maybe he could spend more time with Mina if he left that behind and went home. He'd have a true friend. It might be better. Mina said, "Hey look, it's Teleki." Izuku's heart stopped pounding and his stomach turned over. When he turned around, he noticed Mina examining the TVs on exhibit. When his mother was the only one on the screen, he let out a sigh of relief. She appeared upset. It was about her missing son, according to the headline. On camera, she was crying for her strange son to return home. Since Hisashi's death, Izuku had not witnessed her in such misery. A wave of remorse swept over the kid. However, a few days of pain is little compared to what they have forced him to go through. A bystander exclaimed, "Oh, I've read about this online." Izuku snarled at the statement, "Teleki's missing kid, rumors say he's quirkless." Izuku's heart broke when Mina responded, "That pisses me off." Izuku gazed at her, surprised that she had not mentioned the peculiar aspect. "She's a pro-hero, but lost her own son. Come on," he said. It made Izuku very thrilled to think, poor kid must be starving. His parents better feel guilty about it. She reprimanded his mother and showed sympathy for the oddball youngster instead of making fun of him. Holding back his tears required a lot of strength. But he felt awful again when he saw his mother's expression. Mina gave him a perplexed look and said, maybe it's not entirely her fault. Just this time, Izuku could give his mother the benefit of the doubt, even though it hurt to say it. Pros don't have it easy, and someone in the top 30s must have a lot of responsibilities. You know that vigilante with green flames. Out of all the heroes trying to catch him, I hear Teleki is working the hardest. The girls considered what he had said. Mina responded, yeah, that's fair. Izuku wholeheartedly agreed with her when she said, but still, there's gotta be something seriously wrong for a kid to go missing. They continued to watch the interview for a short time. When questioned if the boy had been abducted, Teleki responded that it was unlikely because there had not been a break-in. She hardly said anything in response to questions regarding the boy's home life. This made many wonder if her son was a runaway, but she didn't mention it and no one asked. Izuku's heart was scorching and thumping simultaneously. As she massaged her sore noggin, Mina murmured, my head's gonna explode. Zhu walked her out of the library after saying, congratulations. I think you earned the night off. Somehow, Mina had made it through 3 days of Zhu's rigorous instruction. I know I've said this a lot, but thanks for your help, Zhu. Mina replied. The idea made her pink skin crawl. If I didn't have you, I might have to do summer school. They waited for their parents outside the library. One of them, anyway. Mina stated abruptly, hey Zhu, what's your opinion on the Green Devil? Zhu said, the vigilante. Why are you asking? Izuku raised his palm to his chin and said, well, we got your opinion on Teleki, but this guy is something else. Just curious what you think. They asked him how he felt about himself. Well, he's breaking the law by doing hero work without a license, but nothing seriously bad has happened. In fact, he's doing more good than harm. His non-lethal flames are good for intimidating without doing damage, and half a dozen criminals have been arrested thanks to him. Mina wore a puzzled expression. Mina concurred, yeah, he is pretty good at what he does. After hearing this, Izuku was taken aback. Do you think he could be our age? If he is, then he better not get caught. When I become a hero, I'm working with this guy. He questioned, you wanna be a hero? She gave a hearty nod. Going to UA in a year and a half. Izuku gave her a loving smile despite appearing momentarily surprised. I'm sure you'll be a great hero. Mina smiled broadly in return, and his eyes were more joyful than she had ever seen. They continued their conversation about the Green Devil. In order to apprehend the vigilante herself and turn him into her sidekick, Mina apparently desired to become a professional. That made Zhu laugh, but he wouldn't mind that in private. When the girl saw her parents' automobile coming, she looked around. Her pal had vanished. "Hey Zhu, come meet my folks." "Zhu," she said. He needed to think about something significant. Izuku hopped from roof to roof, took a seat, and gazed at the sunset. He wiped a tear from his eye and lowered his mask and hoodie. "Ashido, thank you. You've helped me more than you know, more than I imagined you would. I'm sorry for leaving without a goodbye, but I meant what I said. You will be great a hero." With test results in hand, Mina exclaimed, "Freedom!" Quote, as she marched through the streets. "Victory!" she exclaimed while holding her test results in her hand. "This is my diploma from graduating the University of Zhu." Mina shocked her parents and teachers by receiving straight B's on her exams. She was unable to locate her friend, but she wanted to thank him for the assistance. "But it's all right," he was aware of her excitement. Izuku, who was standing on their library's roof, observed his companion celebrating from a few meters away. Seeing how delighted they were made him smile. He soared away, saying goodbye with a serious expression. He ignored another missing person poster he came across on his route to his destination. Yagi House. Izuku felt like puking. The big house before him was one of his hells, not his home. Still, his family must have been impacted by his 18-day disappearance. Just an inch from going back to his life as Izuku Yagi, he approached the front door and gazed at the doorknob. Am I truly prepared for this? They'll probably be upset with me if I return, and I'll be in worse shape than if I were living on the streets. There won't be any changes. However, something must have changed. Perhaps my absence caused them to change, allowing me to have a family. No more bullying, the ability to speak with Izumi once more, and the return of Toshinori and Inko's gaze. I might be able to speak with Ashido as well. I am able to lead a typical existence. Izuku was going to open the door, but he did one thing before since his aspirations were bigger than reason. He pulled out a bottle of water and sprayed it on his hair. His green highlights and tips were wiped away by the white hair dye. Izuku opened the door slowly and whispered to himself, "Please don't make me regret this." Fortunately, there was nobody on the ground floor. It took him a little longer to get ready now that he was inside. He placed his big backpack next his shoes at the open entrance. He read the well-known text. He has devoted numerous hours to examining the table containing the photographs of Hisashi Midoriya and Nana Shimura. There was a little vase of flowers next the photos. Izuku sensed something was off, but he hardly looked at it. He might become overly emotional if he encountered his biological father and grandmother. Only the fading flowers beside Hisashi's photo caught his attention. He tried to be as quiet as possible as he walked through the house. No one appeared to be at home. He entered the room he feared the most, the upstairs. That floor housed his sisters' and parents' rooms. Voices came to him from Izumi's room. As he listened, they sounded both ecstatic and dreadfully familiar. He was familiar with that rough voice from anywhere. He's been showing up in this area the most. We can do a stakeout and catch him in the act, he said. Bakugo, he moaned in his head. He also heard Izumi's voice. When Izuku heard who they were referring about, his pulse began to race. He wins by catching people off guard and intimidating them, but we'll get the jump on him. That'll give us a shot at taking him down. Katsuki exclaimed enthusiastically, we'll take down that arrogant bastard who thinks he can do whatever he wants. We'll make him talk. He'll tell us where Izuku is. Best of all, taking down the Green Devil will make a killer debut for the next top heroes. Izuku felt like puking, fleeing, and, to his astonishment, beating the living daylights out of them with every word they said. I'm happy to see that my favorite individuals haven't changed. Was it sarcasm? Thankful that no one saw him, he turned to leave. He returned to the lower level. Perhaps his parents would respond to him more favorably. He took a seat in the living room and waited for a while. They remain incredibly self-centered. They put their own pride ahead of mine, even when I'm not around. Why did I decide to save them? Izuku was taken aback by that random thinking. Reprimanding himself, he recalled that he was here to try to reunite with his family, but only if he was given a better life. He went to close the door after realizing he had left it open. Then he noticed it. Hisashi's portrait was missing from the table containing the portraits of his deceased family members. His father was no longer there, and his flowers had withered, but Nana's was still kept up nicely. Izuku's heart began to beat more rapidly and forcefully. He had an idea that made him feel like lead. No. He rushed back up the stairs and into his parents' room, saying, "Don't tell me." He noticed that there was nothing on top of Inko's nightstand. "Mom, please." His eyes were full with tears. He checked the dresser, but there was no Hisashi there. Izuku returned to the nightstand and, with a trembling hand, opened the drawer. He experienced fear, suffering, agony, and a host of other terrible emotions as a result of what he saw. He saw her old wedding ring and the framed photos of his father that used to adorn different areas of the house. It was then that Izuku understood. Inko was attempting to forget about Hisashi and ignore him. Even worse, Izuku discovered the Hisashi artifacts and the burned-out escape letter he had left behind. All of a sudden, he recalled the night he fled, when he attempted to gain an answer from everyone and his last frantic plea for love was turned down. However, it wasn't disregarded. The answer came from Inko. Izuku really wanted to know why his own mother refused to look at him. Because he resembled him from birth. Izuku was essentially Hisashi in miniature. A continual reminder that she was unable to save her spouse. That's it, then. She doesn't consider me her son. Simply the embodiment of her failure. Izuku discovered a photo of himself and Hisashi having fun in the backyard. He fell to his knees and sobbed in private. "Why won't you look at me because of that? Because I make you think of how you let your husband get away with it. You failed as a hero, so you've neglected me. I suppose we can add parenting to your list of shortcomings." Teleki. Quote. Izuku got to his feet, his face streaming with tears and a gloomy scowl. Before they could leave any trace, he removed them. Before returning things to its original state, he snapped a photo of himself and his father in the yard. Desperate to get out of the house that had abandoned him, he walked back out the door. Tried to put Hisashi and him out of mind. Why should I care if they don't? I've only ever experienced agony from them. No more, that is. Rome in hell, Yagis. Izuku fled, his heart exploding and gushing blood. Another poster of a missing person caught his eye. Placing his palm on it, he stoked his glowing flames. The form of his hand had a blazing dark gray scorch mark on it, but he was unaware of it. A year ago, Izumi, the daughter of the Yagi family, was enjoying her 13th birthday. Inko said, "Happy birthday, sweetie." Toshinori said, "Look at how big you've grown." There were streamers on the trees and fence, a table laden with cards and presents for the girl, and a huge party going on in the backyard. However, one person was prohibited from being close to that table. In actuality, even though it was his birthday, he was hardly there for the celebration. Sitting beneath a tree, Izuku watched with sadness as his parents and a few of Izumi's friends lavished her with love. He was only informed once, when Toshinori instructed him to retrieve Izumi's cake from the refrigerator. Izuku didn't raise an objection. On his birthday, he was accustomed to being disregarded. When he entered the house and turned the corner to the kitchen, he discovered an elderly guy drenched in blood on the floor. The elderly guy raised his head and exclaimed, "Ah! He's dead. Ah, he's alive." Izuku exclaimed, "I'm alive," and grabbed the elderly man's napkins. He questioned his stepfather's former mentor, Grandpa Torino, "Don't you ever get tired of this old gag? You're the one who screams every time, don't you get tired of that?" He replied. Izumi frequently forgot who Gran Torino was when he visited, saying, "Anyway, what are you doing in here, kid? Party's over there. Go join your sister who has worse memory than me." She is undoubtedly not his favorite grandchild, but Toshi made up for it by claiming she was kidding. He tried to pull something together by saying in an unsteady voice, I was just getting the cake." A female voice said, "Did someone say cake?" Izuku's mouth dropped as he turned to gaze behind him. The R-rated heroine and Yue strode into his kitchen. Teacher of heroism. Midnight. Izuku was utterly shocked to discover a professional in his kitchen, and the hottest one he had ever seen. Lucky me, I didn't miss the best part. He needed to be restarted by Gran Torino using a cane to his skull. Midnight, he exclaimed sharply. As joyful tears flooded his eyes, Izuku felt his heart leap with joy. The one and only, let me guess, Izuku right. Happy birthday, dear. Knelt before the boy and said, "Thanks. What are you doing here?" Izuku was shocked to hear, "Didn't your dad tell you? He's going to start teaching at UA in 2 years. He invited me as a special guest." This surprise made him quite thrilled, yet something didn't feel quite right. I never knew Dad would be teaching at UA. Most likely, it was meant to be unexpected. Quote. Midnight laughed and put a finger to his lips to halt his exuberant questions. I can't believe I'm meeting you. I've got so many questions. What's UA like? What's the curriculum like? He said. Izuku's blush and smile faded considerably as she said, don't worry, hun, we'll get to your questions later. For now, let's enjoy the party. I haven't met your sister yet. Midnight held his hand as he took the cake out of the refrigerator and said, alright, sorry. She gave me a mischievous wink and asked, mind being my usher? As they left with Gran Torino in tow, Izuku was once more a flushed mess. When Midnight showed there, the majority of the children reacted to Izuku in a similar way. Izuku was more agreeable to her than Izumi and Katsuki. Izuku was at the far end of the table when it was time to blow out the candles. Without hesitation, Midnight drew him to her side and snuck him close enough to watch Izumi extinguish her candles. With her parents accompanying her, Izumi went up to Midnight after the cake was sliced and everyone had a piece. The dominatrix grinned at the girl's excitement and said, Midnight, guess what? I'm gonna be going to UA one day. Maybe you can be my teacher. Izumi simply grinned and placed her hands behind her head, saying, oh my, reaching for the stars are we. Well, I hope you're prepared for the grueling hard work. Her haughtiness turned Midnight off, especially since Toshinori and Inko didn't object. Please, my quirk is so strong, it'll be a piece of cake. She said, if you say so. What about Izuku, will he be joining you? I think he'd make a delightful pupil. The atmosphere abruptly soured when the Yagas failed to look her in the eye. Toshi said, he won't, it's impossible for him. Izumi spat, he's quirkless. Midnight regarded them with a severe expression. The parents gave her a startled look, but Izumi appeared a little more irritated. There's no rule stating that you need a quirk to be a hero. He's as welcome as anyone to give it his best. Midnight glared down at her, saying, you can't be serious. He'll only get in the way. Midnight left to search for Izuku, saying, you should be careful, or it'll be your unchecked ego getting in others' way. She discovered a blonde punk harassing the oddball boy. Izuku simply raised his hands in defense. What the hell was fucking Midnight doing with you? She came out here holding your hand, explained Deku. They said, she just wanted me to usher her, Kachan. That's it, I was just walking her in. Said the pro before Katsuki could finish his jealously motivated interrogation. Pardon me, but this isn't the time or place for playing rough, boys. Slowly, Katsuki turned to see the heroine standing menacingly above him. He remained silent for once. Pointing at the home, Midnight said, Izuku, let's go. Izumi and Katsuki were left in amazement and despair as Izuku nodded and followed the perplex, his face brightening as he said, you wanted to know more about me, right? I'd like some privacy for that. As she settled into the bed, Midnight remarked, this is a nice room. From the doorway, Izuku murmured, it's my sister's room. Midnight saw that he was trembling a little, as if he was terrified, and said, I'm not allowed in here. Of his own twin sister. Honey, that girl is spoiled enough that I think it's okay for you to be in her room while she's partying outside. Izuku bowed and entered the room. She didn't inquire about his quarters, at least. As she offered herself a piece of cake, she began, this might be impolite of me. Izuku looked down a little, but she was right when she continued, but your sister and her blonde friend are very unpleasant people. As a teacher, I'm used to kids, so I know when someone needs a lesson in humility. I don't disagree, but their arrogance isn't unearned. Izumi has telekinesis that could surpass our mom, and Kachan has powerful explosions. They're ambitious and have the powers to become heroes. Izuku, those two are powerful, but far from heroic. If harassing innocent people and looking down on others makes a hero, I wouldn't have thrown so many villains in jail. Izuku's gaze widened. Izumi and Bakugo had essentially been compared as villains by Midnight. She stroked the area on the bed beside her and swallowed another piece of cake. Izuku blushed atomically as he sat down next the older woman. Now, enough about them. Go on, ask me anything you want. Nothing is off limits. She excused herself to go fetch something before he began. After a minute, she returned with a clean fork. Izuku embraced the dominatrix's charity with a loving smile and said, I noticed you didn't have any cake. You can enjoy mine, hun. The conversation continued for hours after they returned to the subject of heroes. Information about the UA, other heroes, and the duty heroes have to defend the populace. Izuku was having the finest birthday ever, thanks to Midnight. He was obviously unhappy when it was time for her to go, but he was also grateful that she had given in to his desires. She said, "Hold on, you've got a bit of cake on your face." Izuku rubbed his palm along his lower jaw and questioned, "Where?" Midnight knelt next to him and gave him a cheek kiss. When Izuku felt her gentle lips against his face, he instantly froze and became enraged. She had kind blue eyes and a soft grin when she disconnected. "Happy birthday, Izuku. Now, I've never had a better birthday than that one. I suppose it's not so unusual that, of all days, I would think about my former life." A man gasped, "Ack." Gasp, hack. The green devil had pinned a robber to the wall by the throat and was choking him with a fiery hand. "Sorry, I just got lost in my own head." He woke up at 3 in the morning and had no desire to go back to sleep because he was terrified of what his imagination would create. He tightened his hold on the man's throat and wrapped him in green flames that spread throughout his body. He quickly lost unconscious and was left for the cops to pick up next to a pay phone. Izuku fights filth as his first birthday activity. Reliving the past is the last thing he desires. 1:15 p.m. Walking amid the dead-eyed individuals was Izuku in his civilian alias, Zu. He felt terrible about returning home. He finally received an answer after years of searching. Because he made his mother think of her husband, whom she had failed to protect, she would not look at him. Even though he has never done anything wrong, his existence is a slap in her face. Why does she put on a front of wanting me back if that's how she truly feels? Feeling guilty. When she disregarded my pleadings, where was that? Quote. Crash. The boy's attention was drawn to the sound of a villain attack. He was the first to rush to its origin. He watched as Mt. Lady dealt with a gigantic enemy. As he watched with the audience, Izuku thought, I could use a healthy distraction. A girl his age with a bob cut and chestnut brown hair was standing next to him. Mount. Lady was doing quite well in her battle, even striking suggestive stances while delivering her blows. But Izuku saw something that nobody else did. Her footing was off when she attempted to knock the villain out with a high kick. Additionally, a nearby structure would be destroyed if she fell. The brunette next to him became confused as he dashed out of the crowd. Mount. Lady's last blow was, say goodnight. And, as Izuku had prophesied, she started to sink backward. Izuku stood right in front of the building and behind her. He would use his quirk without anyone noticing. His hands formed a much larger pair of fire hands, and he shot 2 massive flames from them as he climbed into the air. Before Mt. Lady could scratch the building, he grabbed her. However, he failed to notice how quickly she was plummeting. He tried to touch her back with his hands, but he missed and took her enormous ass by the tail. He could feel them as though he were touching them with his bare hands, which is the worst part. Additionally, Mt. Lady didn't try to regain her footing because she was agitated. Izuku was therefore forced to press his hands into her smooth rear end. It felt much lighter for Mt. Lady before it could become any worse. Izuku could push back to her feet since it was light enough. As soon as she was okay, he pulled his hands back, put his arms over his face, and took a deep breath. I know I requested a diversion, but not in that manner. This 14th birthday was turning out to be an incredible one. He was so agitated that he failed to notice the professional pulling him away for interrogation. Izuku didn't fully hear her, still processing the notion that he had touched a woman in that manner. What the hell was that, you little perv? Even if it was accidental and indirect, the emotion was ingrained in his palms. Mount. Lady observed his gaze before she could say anything more. They were in a glow, not excited or afraid. As if he was more critical of himself within than she was. Izuku turned away after finally meeting her gaze and allowing her to see the bags underneath. Hey, are you okay? He asked. You were about to crash into that building. I was trying to catch you. Mount. Lady was unable to discern any deception or other motives. She would have been in serious trouble if she had done more collateral damage. I didn't mean to pun. She gestured to a brunette who was throwing up in a pot plant and asked, okay, but what's the deal with her? In order to calm the children down and have a meaningful discourse, Mt. Lady took them to a cafe for some refreshments. Mount. Lady had placed a strawberry shortcake, an order of mochi, and 2 cups of green tea on their table. As the children gave their versions of events, the expert clasped her hands together in front of her mouth. Thanks so much for saving my butt. I would have been screwed if I had crushed that building. One of the brunettes, Ochako Uraraka. To clear her stomach, she sipped her tea. She whispered the final sentence, "It was nothing, although it would have been a great opportunity for my family's company." "Company?" inquired Izuku. Ochako combed her hair with her hands. Coming from the sticks herself, Mount Lady could relate to the zero-gravity girl. "Why yeah, it's not something I'm exactly comfortable with discussing, but we're not exactly in a comfortable financial place. Well, since you helped save a hero, I think you deserve a reward. I'll write you a check from my agency." Uraraka, right. Ochako was surprised at the unexpected kindness. Bup, bup, bup. The creamy blonde stopped her by putting a finger to her lips. What? No, that's okay, you don't have to." Izuku was as taken aback by the pro as Uraraka was. "I insist. Honestly, I'd feel guilty not repaying you for what you went through to help me. One thing about being a hero, always accept your fans' gifts." At first, he perceived her as a narcissistic, shallow, and self-centered attention seeker. She is, too. Mount Lady turned to the young man at their table and said, Anyway, I only acted after I saw Zhu jump in the danger zone." Zhu shook his head and asked, "Speaking of, are you sure you're okay with just the tea?" The creamy blonde gave him a smirk and said, "I'm okay with just this. I'm not really hungry right now." Zhu turned red under his mask and turned his head away, saying, "Right, I wouldn't be either after all the cake you got your hands on." They prepared to part ways after paying for their dinner, but Izuku was interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. "Here, you can have our leftovers," Uraraka exclaimed with joy as she held out a pink paper box that was tied with purple string. Mount Lady shoved it into his hands and said, "I told you, I don't need any." Izuku took the leftover shortcake and mochi and said, "Just take it, this is the least you deserve." Uraraka smiled brightly and contagiously at him and said, "Thank you, I appreciate it." Mount Lady touched her chin with a finger. "Do me a favor and get some rest." Izuku gave her a perplexed expression. "What do you mean by that?" "Just saying, you're not gonna pull a lot of girls with those bags under your pretty eyes." Zhu was blushing. He said goodbye to Uraraka and the pro. He stared at the appetizing-looking treats when he opened his remaining package. Mount Lady offered him a fork, which he used to eat. Izuku came to a realization at that very moment. Did I really go on a date with a hot pro hero and a pretty girl my age? Additionally, he discovered that the chopsticks that Uraraka had swallowed were the identical ones that he had received from Mount Lady. To me, happy birthday. That evening, surprisingly, Izuku felt good about himself. He can't recall ever feeling better. In conclusion, he had a date with two attractive girls, he had prevented the demolition of a building, and he had won a 4-on-1 duel with just minor injuries. "Yes, sir," he felt amazing. He said, but the unconscious scum didn't hear him. "Something's gonna go wrong." He was aware that he would always be smacked down by someone or something if he climbed too high. He considered his vigilantism. He was beginning to frighten criminals, who would team up to eliminate him. They gave it a shot, and the Green Devil found them easy to handle. Heroes and the police are searching for him, but since he has made the streets safer, it is unlikely that he would receive a severe punishment. That is, if he is ever apprehended. So what's this awful feeling in my chest? Abruptly, he felt his respirator being pulled away. He caught it before it flew away thanks to his enhanced reflexes, and he used his free hand to cover his mouth. Telekinetic pull. Izuku spotted two people he prayed he would never see again at the other end of the alley. "Damn it, I should have known. Found ya, bastard. Hands in the air, devil." "So much for a happy birthday," he said, feeling the burning sensation in his chest return. Strangeness. Psycho flames. The user's emotional and mental condition affects the temperature. The user's flames are icy and frightening if they are depressed, unhappy, or looking for solitude. The user's flames intensify to a great degree if they are enraged, vindictive, or just agitated. As the user gains control, they can modify the temperature, but emotions still play a role. In the morning, birthdays are usually fantastic occasions for pleasure, laughing, and celebration. The gathering of family and friends to commemorate the birth of a loved one. This isn't the case with Izumi Yagi, though. The loss of her twin brother and the rise of the so-called Green Devil caused her parents to become overly preoccupied with hero work or police activity. Katsuki ignited his palms and exclaimed, "That's why we're gonna take down that vigilante bastard. He is amazingly intelligent for such an egocentric narcissist." He concluded that the Green Devil has been approaching a location near them based on the locations of the vigilante's most recent strikes. The two of them felt it would be better to deal with an outlaw without any certification rather than taking this hunch to the police. This guy was first seen around here when Izuku disappeared. He might know something about where he is. We'll make him talk, Izumi responded. Plus, this'll be our big debut, catching a vigilante the heroes and police couldn't, exclaimed Katsuki. Now, the three of them ended up in a dim alley as a result. The Green Devil was facing Izumi and Bakugo, who were prepared to pummel him into submission. In contrast, Izuku felt his emotions growing stronger, but he controlled his heart. To avoid being identified, his hand was still covering his lips. No more running, ya bastard! Katsuki screamed, his hands glimmering. When we're done, you're going to wish the pros had arrested you. Izumi said, tell us what you did to my brother. Izuku wasn't sure if he should be touched or angry. On the one hand, Izumi did not accept responsibility for the vigilante's acts, instead seeming to blame her for what happened to him. Furthermore, Bakugo appeared to be putting his own fame ahead of what was right. On the other hand, she appeared to genuinely care about her brother. Izuku carefully removed his hand from his mouth while closing his eyes. Green flames suddenly erupted from his mouth, forming a kind of scarf that stretched from his nose to his collarbone. A pair of ends cascaded behind him. His eyes blazed with his quirk as well when he opened them. The real fire in his eyes caused the hair on his forehead to stand up. His voice became a little rougher and deeper as he covered it. What are you doing here? Is a straightforward inquiry. His voice was so recognizable that Bakugo and Izumi stopped for a second. And the fire encircling his lips. The devil said, leave. Once again, fastening his respirator to his hip. He moved so they could view the four men who were unconscious and surrounded by icy flames. Katsuki maintained his victory-hungry smile in spite of his success. We're not like the street trash you like to hang out with. He swung his right arm back and pounced at the Green Devil. Izumi, who was behind, supported the blonde by tossing little objects. So obvious. Izuku sighed inwardly. With his forearm covered in protective fire, he deftly sidestepped the approaching bullets and stopped Katsuki's right hook. Bakugo froze the instant he made contact, asking, is this how you thank someone for saving your life? This is your only warning. Stay away from me. Izumi gripped Bakugo's chest and pulled him back. What the fuck? Why am I scared of this man? I hate his peculiarity, Izumi said. Kachan, are you okay? As the kid got to his feet shakily, his smile flimsy and strained. Izuku squinted his eyes and said, yeah, it'll take more than mind games to stop me. You say that, but it's obvious that you're shaken. Your pride prevents you from thinking clearly. You'll attack me once more without any preparation and end up in a shaky mess. Izumi shot into the air as he concluded his inner monologue. Bastard, she screamed, bringing her fist down. Izuku blocked by crossing his arms over his head. His arms hardly felt the contact, yet it was strong enough to cause him to kneel and kick up dust around them. He made fun of her by saying, you need more training. She used telekinesis to increase the strength of her punch, but it's only increasing the knockback instead of the damage. You need to shut the fuck up. Katsuki screamed, hurling a sparking palm at the devil. Izumi was thrown against Katsuki by Izuku, who took hold of her arm. There was a loud thud when the two of them struck a wall. Izuku said in a patronizing tone, are we done here? The brats gave him a furious look. Izumi's eyes widened as he continued, if so, then leave. Go back to your families before they get worried. Her identical brother was the only thing on her mind. She gritted her teeth in resentment. Damn you. She sprung from Bakugo and attempted to fist again. Izuku pushed her to the ground and sidestepped. From behind, Katsuki said, we're not done. Izuku avoided a direct explosion by just cocking his head to the side. He said icily, predictable. Taking Bakugo by the arm, he tossed him over his shoulder. He read his attacks so readily that the explosive teenager was shocked. Shaking and unable to see a path to triumph, he and Izumi lay on the ground. The Green Devil can instill dread like it's nothing, is swift, and has good defense. Izumi, muttered Bakugo. The girl with the green hair nodded and said, set me up. She picked the vigilante up off the ground as quickly as she could. Izuku had the option to fly out of the invisible hold by using his flames, but he chose not to. He was unable to. He locked up because of this sense of helplessness trapped in midair. It reminded me of too many terrible times. As in that day. He was so preoccupied that he failed to see Bakugo leaping at him. "You're mine." He pounded Izuku's chest with a strong blow. As the child was flung backwards, an orange flash of light filled the entire alley. He was in excruciating pain as he fell, and his heart was racing uncontrollably. Everything returned. Those terrible abuse memories. With one hand on his blazing chest and another on the floor, he landed on his feet in a crouched stance. Breathing heavily, he crouched in on himself. Katsuki and Izumi gazed down at him, regaining their sense of accomplishment. Katsuki mocked, "How'd you like that, you piece of shit? That's not all you've got, right? Come on, show us what you can do," Izumi yelled. Izuku continued to emit smoke from his chest. Actually, the smoke was starting to hiss and was more noticeable. Katsuki became agitated and launched another strong blast at the opponent, who appeared to be dejected. It was an error. Izuku grabbed his hand and their fingers entwined just as he detonated the blast. The vigilantes hardly felt the heat as the explosion was largely hidden. With surprise, Katsuki exclaimed, "You're going to wish you hadn't done that." Before sobbing in agony, he was being crushed, as well as burned. Izuku torched his hand with green flames after removing it from his chest. He delivered a forceful blow directly at Katsuki's abdomen. A surge of green fire blasted him back after the flames forced his fist forward for a more powerful blow. He moved over slightly, gasping for breath and spitting up. Izuku nearly immobilized him with the devastation he inflicted. Most notably, Katsuki's stomach was burnt, and there was a hole burned through his clothing. How in the world did cold flames end up? He can't burn anything, according to the report. Izumi screamed, "What did you do to him?" He said icily, "Nothing he didn't deserve." Izumi made another attempt to seize him, but Izuku was fast enough. A wave of condensed fire, thick enough to serve as cover, was released by him. That is, the flames would be grabbed by Izumi's telekinesis rather than him. The ball of moss moaned. The night was already warm, and it was getting hotter. It had the same crippling effect, although it was less severe. To observe where the devil gone, she attempted to soar aloft. He discovered him hovering over her, his feet blazing. Izumi was about to respond when Izuku withdrew his burning hand. But this strike was not the same as the one he delivered to Katsuki. Izumi was grabbed by a big green fire hand. After being engulfed by the fire structure, she suffered from intense heat that burned her entire body. With a blast of bright green heat, Izuku punched Katsuki once more with the fist. On the ground, the two of them were smoky, beaten, and fractured. Hovering down, Izuku gazed at their pitiful shapes. The flames were mostly extinguished when he started to cool down. Izumi and Katsuki sat up again, shakily. Izuku let out a sigh. He repeated, "Why are you here?" Despite the disparity in strength, they both still had the resolve to fight. Katsuki moaned, "Why, you fucking moron? Why do you think? You're an outlawed bastard who thinks he can do whatever he wants. We're gonna stop you, 'cause it's what heroes do," Izumi responded. The usage of that word made Izuku's heart start to boil. Heroes. Firstly, you're far too weak to be able to fight me. Face it, you can't live up to your own hype. Second, you're hypocrites, not heroes. You're doing the exact same thing I'm doing. You don't have the authority to take me down, but you think you can do whatever you want, too. What will be your excuse when go home bruised and burned? Izumi and Katsuki didn't respond to him but about their own abilities. They liked him because of what they were doing. His correctness infuriated them. Arg! The green devil let out a startled cry of agony. His right face had been sliced diagonally from his jawline by a jagged fragment of shattered glass. Blood trickled through his fingers and into his palm as he covered the wound with his palms. He had recently discovered the hard way that while his flames provided protection against blunt assault, they were very easy to penetrate with sharp things. A woman in a form-fitting supersuit appeared at the alley's entrance. Izumi and Katsuki appeared startled but not particularly relieved or joyful. Under his fiery mouth cover, Izuku's frown was the worst. By saying, "Izumi, Katsuki, are you two okay?" Teleki was inadvertently fueling the green devil's flames. He was disregarded in favor of the child prodigies, as usual. Inko was furious when she saw the brat's burns and bruises and turned to face the injured vigilante. Her outburst of rage, which was insignificant in compared to the child in front of her, was, "What did you do to these kids?" The statement, "Nothing they didn't bring on themselves," surprised Teleki a little. Behind her, Izumi and Bakugo were giving Izuku a worried, angry glare. "What are you talking about?" Inko gave the two a quick look before dismissing the devil's accusations, saying, Why don't you ask the ones who came and attacked me first? The arrogant punks who think they're above the law, cowering behind you. However, a crack was beginning to appear in what he was saying. That's right, I'm talking to you too. You come at me full of hot air, but the moment you realize I'm not a pushover, you hide behind someone who can back up her words. Well, what's wrong? Lost your nerve? Izuku was aware that his words would incite them. It always happens when they strike their egos. Previously, he had remained silent. Now, however, it was strangely thrilling to have the chance to fully express his own feelings. The feelings he was compelled to suppress surged in waves, and his rage ignited, as well as smoke. So you admit to being weaklings who need someone else to save them, or do you admit you're idiots who are no better than me? That was the final straw. Before Inko realized it, Izumi and Bakugo were rushing aggressively at the devil. Shut you, yelled Katsuki. Damn you, said Izumi. Fwoosh. A sudden, enormous outburst of green fire blew the two of them away. Inko barely had time to move herself and the children out of the way before the entire alley was engulfed in a flash of viridescent flames. What is this? He's supposed to have chilling flames, however, this heat. It is comparable to Endeavor. Teleki pondered. Everything on the ground, including the 4 unconscious thugs, was on fire from the Green Devil's eruption of rage. The rest of their bodies turned into burned lumps of meat and bone, and they let out a brief cry of agony before their throats and lungs. Izuku barely realized that his flames had changed from freezing to melting flesh. His gaze was fixed on those in authority who had destroyed his youth and made him flee. It occurred once again. You once again sided with these two when they were destroying my life. Has nothing changed? He gave Bakugo and Izumi a fierce gaze. Letting you live was a mistake. Before spreading into green embers, the pillar of flames experienced a sharp increase in temperature and size. Teleki examined the damage while hovering over the Green Devil's location. A nearby dumpster melted, and the entire alley was reduced to cinders. On the pavement, there were tiny green flames that would soon go out. The demon was left standing next to a silver respirator. The 4 thugs he'd knocked unconscious before anyone showed up were the worst of it. They had become utterly unidentifiable, smoking piles of scorched flesh and bone. The smell of burned bodies filled the entire alley. Katsuki snarled, "That sick bastard. Cold flames, my ass. He's been hiding his abilities to trick us," Izumi replied. Prior to the heat explosion, Inko was distracted by what she was seeing. Izumi and Bakugo had been baited by the Green Devil into assaulting him, but she didn't feel comfortable with it. Did they actually attempt to assault him initially? However, they lack authority and are not yet professionals. Inko began to doubt her faith in the wayward children for the first time. And they seemed so violent before he put up his flames. In the meantime, rather than leaping to and from rooftops, Izuku was flying over everything, speeding through the metropolis. He stopped behind a block of apartments. When he skidded to the ground, he saw a trail of smoke. Whatever became of me back there? As he undid his fire mask, he wondered. He touched a discarded newspaper and lit his fire in his left hand. He could tell from the black smoke that it burnt. My flames are becoming hotter now? As the newspaper was reduced to ash, he pondered. The fire spread to the chilly concrete instead of going out. Burning fire on any surface. Izuku drenched the fire with his water bottle. It died down after hissing. It wasn't quite extinguished, though. It required more to extinguish than a typical fire would. Let's see. My flames were as chilly as usual until Bakugo scolded me. I simply recall becoming very enraged and assaulting them. The fact that they haven't changed infuriated me. Then, as usual, when Teleki arrived and joined them, Izuku clenched his fist and smoke poured out of it. He recognized the connection between his emotional condition and his abilities. Then he realized what he had done, and his eyes widened. Those criminals. I burned them to death. Izuku had never considered killing someone while he was alive. He also took 4. Even though it would never have occurred if Bakugo, Yagi, and Teleki hadn't arrived, he felt bad about it. He noticed a drop of blood on his right hand when he looked at his hands. Teleki had cut him, but he forgot about it. He suddenly ignited a bright flame on his thumb. I deserve this. Izuku snarled and growled in excruciating anguish. In the most agonizing way possible, he sealed the wound on his cheek by dragging his burning thumb over it. Caution. Even though he was panting profusely after finishing the task, he was unable to give himself a break. Near him, he discovered a fragment of shattered glass. 4 lives. It wasn't quite as terrible as what happened after he cut his right hand and ran the glass over it 4 times till it bled. Izuku severely punished himself for killing those men by engulfing his injured hand in blazing hot flames. They might have transformed into better men with brighter futures, for all he knew. He stole their futures from them. He examined the damage once his wounds had been sealed. A burning horror of its former self was his right hand. The scars would undoubtedly be permanent, even if some of the harm subsided. In the lake, he could see his reflection. He had a freshly cauterized scar on his right cheek, dark bags under his eyes, and a bird's-eye scowl. Steam rose as he placed his palm in the puddle. He got up and got ready to take off before anyone noticed. He was about to do so when he noticed another ad for Izuku Yagi's missing person. The next thing that happened was thoughtless. He touched the poster with his good hand and turned it to ash. In the meantime, a dark shrouded man laughed to himself. How delicious. I wish I could have seen more after, but I can't use the clairvoyance quirk when my pawns are no longer alive. You surprise me yet again, Green Devil. I do hope your next family reunion will be just as entertaining as this was. HMHMHM. Bitter. Resentful. Enraged. Hateful. Z's whole being was experiencing these emotions as he gazed at the news on his phone. The Green Devil attacks kids. The vigilante menace known as the Green Devil has severely injured 2 middle school kids in a dark alley the other night. The victims were covered in severe burns and bruises before the number 30 hero. Teleki arrived on the scene. Apparently, the vigilante has the ability to make his trademark green flames burn with intensity. In what could be described as a volcanic eruption, he incinerated 4 disarmed men on the ground, already incapable of defending themselves. The victims are Katsuki Bakugo and Izumi Yagi. Izuku was scarcely surprised that he would be portrayed as the villain while the brats were praised for their bravery and shown pity. The same annoying narrative keeps coming up. Izuku's knowledge that the victims are unhappy at being pity-treated by others is the only thing preventing him from erupting in rage. Most people remark they're just kids and feel sorry for them. That will cut them down, he knows. With the coldest eyes imaginable, the lad with the black hair and fake white face strolled across the streets in the scorching sun. A familiar truck drove by as he was walking, and he looked directly at the driver. Yagi Toshinori. The world paused for the brief moment their eyes met. The hearts of both men ceased to beat. They shared a one moment that seemed to endure forever. Zu could see which way Toshinori was heading. Bakugo and Izumi were both detained at the same hospital. Izuku balled his good hand into a fist and said, I'm going to see them. He is concerned about them. Being their parent, ignoring the discomfort of a partially healed wound, he clutched his other fist. His chest began to burn again, and he considered lighting Toshinori's truck on fire. In any case, he restrained himself and left with a demeanor that made everyone stand back, as well as hellish green eyes. This was supposed to be a straightforward excursion to the shopping center to buy new sneakers. He had to get rid of a distinguishing characteristic if he was going to encounter individuals from his past, his red sneakers. They wouldn't work for the Green Devil, but they might for his civilian persona. His outburst of anger burned them throughout the last battle. Izuku entered a clothes shop and looked around. He noticed a section with things with a hero motif, and naturally, he spotted the face of All Might. The expression of someone who dismissed him as if he were unimportant. Reaching for a pair of black men's combat boots, he let out a little snarl. He whipped his head to his side and asked, Are you okay? A black-haired girl's worried raven eyes met his. When she saw his menacing glare, she instantly retreated a step. Izuku's eyes grew a little softer. The girl's features caused his blazing heart to slightly chill. Her eyes. Her hair. She seemed to be. The young woman averted her gaze, somewhat alarmed by his penetrating gaze. Even though she spoke shakily, her demeanor and attire were respectable. Why, you seem like something is bothering you. However, based on the height disparity, she seemed to be at least a year older than him, and she. Enormous proportions. Izuku passed past her and turned away. His voice was gruff as he said, I'm fine. His comments did not persuade the young woman. Izuku was deep in contemplation outside the shop. Was she worried? Concerning me? However, it was obvious that my manner turned her off. And the way she looks. She reminded me of the younger version of. Ew, poor. 2 approaching teenagers interrupted his thoughts with a jeering yell. One of them, pointing at Izuku's partially charred footwear, said, Dang, dude. Look at this guy's kicks. They both chuckled and said, Right. Where'd you get the dumpster? Even though they weren't familiar with him, Izuku knew these jerks from Aldera. He forced his way through them since today was not the time for this. He winced when the back of his hoodie and his bandaged hand gripped him. Not so fast. There's no way you can afford whatever's in that bag. We'll take it off your hands before you can steal it, someone said. From that point on, the pain that rushed through his body was nearly incapacitating. This sense of powerlessness as bullies restrained him. It was too familiar. He was struggling to move and was breathing more heavily. Even though he is physically stronger than them, he still suffers from mental health problems brought on by 10 years of suffering. Desperate to find someone who noticed him, he craned his head. He looked back into the girl's eyes. His eyes begged for assistance this time. She sprinted around the corner after turning away. Everything around Izuku vanished as his heart burst. He couldn't move, he was alone, and no one cared enough to take action. She left. She is similar to the others. Something else was raging in his core beneath the layers of deeply ingrained anxiety, fear, and distress. She abandoned me and disregarded my suffering. Never again. Izuku dropped his bag and smashed the hands restraining him in a sudden outburst of strength that came from pure, unadulterated emotion rather than his quirk. He whispered to himself, "Not again," while ignoring the scumbag's agonized moans behind him. "Hold it," a fresh voice said. The two youngsters with injured hands were the target of a mall police officer who ran up to them. Izuku was too preoccupied to dispute that. "Officer, this thief stole from that store and assaulted us," he said. The story didn't appear to persuade the mall cop at all. The girl who had previously fled came up behind the mall police officer and said, "Really now? Well, I would be inclined to ask further, if this young lady didn't tell me everything she saw." Izuku's gaze expanded. She went to get help, so she hadn't left him. The mall cop removed the two who harassed Izuku after the girl discovered his receipt in his purse. He was left alone with the girl, who attempted to return the footwear he had bought. Izuku remained silent for a moment, still in shock and with a regretful expression on her face. "I'm sorry I left you, but I had to find someone with the authority to intervene." He examined every square inch of her face for any hint of dishonesty or ulterior intent. Pure concern was all that was present. For him. His vision got blurry and his breathing became labored. "Oh no, not right now, you weakling, stop crying." Izuku clamped his eyes tight and covered them with his left palm while growling. If a soft hand hadn't touched the back of his nail, he would have bled from digging his nails into his face. Gentle eyes greeted him once more. "Let's get some air." Izuku sobbed almost softly on a nearby bench as she brought him outside the shopping center. He just let out harsh breaths and whimpers now and then. The Ravenet was devastated that he still felt compelled to maintain boundaries and prevent a chaotic breakdown. To dab at his crimson eyes, she handed him a handkerchief. They were left in silence as Izuku wiped away the last of his tears. Thank you, of course." At last, he told her, "I'm not fine." Izuku looked at her, still not understanding the source of this generosity, and said, "I can see that. Would you mind talking about it?" "I'm a good listener." He said, "What's your name?" "Momo Yaoyorozu." "And yours?" He nearly gave her his true name. I'm Zu." Zu looked at his hands rather than her. "Those guys that grabbed me were from Aldera, they're bullies. I had a feeling. I've put in training to get stronger, but I have issues. So when you left while they held me, I felt powerless all over again. But then you came back, with help. That was. What should be expected of someone who witnesses unjust cruelty?" Momo concluded with him. Zu's left hand grasped his right wrist. With sad eyes, Momo said, "I wish more people thought like you do." After what he had gone through, she wanted to reach out and give him a soothing touch. When Izuku heard their names, he shuddered and blamed himself. "Did you say Aldera? The same school Bakugo and Yagi go to?" he remarked sourly. "You must have heard about their encounter with the Green Devil." Izuku's hands trembled with barely contained rage as he said, "I did. I feel so bad for them, having been in such an ordeal." Momo grinned slightly but sensed a, "But, coming. Yaoyorozu, you're a good person. But you're wasting your energy concerning yourself about them. Of all the countless scumbags that make up Aldera, those two are the worst. They arrogantly proclaiming being heroes, but they use their quirks to keep others beneath them. They're especially cruel to the weakest links. I promise you, they are the last people that deserve your sympathy." Momo carefully analyzed his facial expressions. His eyes were the most revealing feature of his hunched figure, which was gripping his wrapped wrist tightly. It's frightening enough to have dark bags and bloodshots from stress and sleep deprivation. But there was 1,000 suns of heat in his glare. She swallowed, then continued. Zu placed his left palm on his face and asked, "Why were you so surprised that I didn't turn a blind eye at you?" Momo was really stunned to learn. "I'm more surprised you didn't join them in picking on me." Nobody's ever done what you did for me. Gritting his teeth, Izuku asked, "What? Not even your parents? Like they even care enough to ask? That can't be true. I'm sure your relationship with them must be difficult, but all you need to do is have an honest conversation with them. I'm sure they still, don't you dare give me that." Momo began to scream. If they really cared, would they ever ask why I kept coming home burned and bruised? Would they neglect to call me for dinner and let me starve for countless nights? Would they put on a grand birthday for their favorite child, and then forget they even had me? You don't have the slightest idea what kind of house I ran away from. You think mixing words is enough to heal these scars? I've tried more times than I can remember to connect with them. You don't know how many cries for help have fallen on deaf ears in that appalling excuse for a home. Momo's outburst left him utterly stunned. She was suddenly the target of Z's frightful look, and tears were streaming down her face. Momo caught a glimpse of the scar on his right cheek as his hand drew his mask down beneath his nose. I know what I am in that family, and trust me, I am not their son. A sheltered creature like you doesn't know the first thing about me. After that final section, neither of them spoke. Z's heart began to slow as his tears dried up. He saw tears welling up in Momo's eyes as he peered directly into them. Suddenly, a tsunami of remorse swept over the bonfire in Izuku's heart. With haste, he grabbed his shopping bag and fled from her. Yaoyorozu said, "Wait," and extended her hand. However, it was too late. In the throng, she lost him. His irate words replayed in her mind. Yaoyorozu raised a hand to dab at her tears. Izuku soared to a rooftop close by. Momo was crying, and he was staring down at her. "What is the matter with you? This is how you give back to her because she was so kind to you." He turned away from the edge and drew his mask down to wipe his tears with his sleeve. He recalled taking off half of his mask in front of her. I forced her to look at my ugly scar as well. His final thought before running away from the first person who offered to assist him with his bullies was, "Damn." With swollen eyes, Yaoyorozu returned to the bench she and Zu shared. He has never received assistance. Not even his parents. I didn't know anything, so I just assumed his predicament. I tried lecturing him even though I probably don't know the whole truth. Momo hid her face in her hands, feeling a few more tears start to fall. He must hate me now. Momo. Her parents were staring at her through the window of her family's limousine when she looked up. It was painfully evident that Momo was crying, but she made an effort to gather herself and join them. Her father said, "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Momo considered what she would say to them. Although it wouldn't really help, she wanted to share with them all Zu had taught her. Without knowing his true name, she was unable to report his family to the authorities. Furthermore, she would be slapping him in the face again if he talked about his terrible background. She hesitated for a moment before opening her mouth to speak. "Mother, father, do you know what goes on in Aldera Middle School?" That afternoon as he sipped his coffee, a detective whispered to himself, "This is odd." He had Teleki's report and other reports about the Green Devil on his desk. A slender blonde man entered through his open door and said, "Tsukachi, how goes the investigation?" "I'm not sure, but I'm surprised you're here. How are the kids? You visited them in the hospital, right?" Toshinori gave a nod. Izumi and Katsuki admitted to going after the Green Devil on their own. "I told them that was brave but irresponsible without having backup or telling anyone. I think they were trying to take him in as a gift for Inko." A small grin came on the blonde man's lips. "A little soft, but okay. So they're getting discharged this week?" "They're children, only in middle school, and they went through something scarring. But yes, and I still have more to say to them." He was clenching his fist as he said that. Tsukachi gave a nod. "You know what, you should go home. I can handle this for now. You should be looking after your wife. I'm sure she's working herself extra hard to find that vigilante." Toshinori appeared astonished. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, take care." Tsukachi nearly shoved his friend out the door before returning to his Green Devil research. "Sorry Toshi, but if I'm right, your biased feelings will make this difficult." Returning to his desk, he took out a medical file. "Izuku Yagi, let's start with you. 14 years old, quirkless at birth, and a student at Aldera. The same night the green flames were found, you vanished." Then Tsukachi looked at the documents he had on the Green Devil. Other than the fact that he possesses a special mental quirk that manifests as icy flames, not much is known about him. Causing people to suffer psychologically by using non-burning fire. This quirk isn't in our database out of hundreds of thousands. After that, Tsukachi examined the report that Teleki had given him. "Up until now, your victims have all been criminals and thugs. None of them have been really hurt, and they all shudder when you were mentioned. This, however, presents a different picture. You were attacked by children and a hero, and your power killed 4 guys. Quirks have been found to develop in stressful conditions, but how could you possibly relate to 2 random children? He has the voice and build of a youngster no older than her daughter, according to what Teleki informed me. The implications of it alone are disturbing. His peculiarity still has a lot of unanswered questions, and if he is still a child, he has a ton of untapped potential. He grabbed a poster of a missing individual. With every generation, quirks get more intense and intricate, and late bloomers could occur. However, they are often 7 to 9 years old. Before drawing conclusions, I need additional information. Tsukachi got up from his desk and peered out his office window. From the detective's perspective, there were 2 options. As Toshinori had advised, Izuku Yagi was abducted while returning home. Dead, perhaps. Alternatively, Izuku fled and turned into the Green Devil. Please let me be wrong now, I've been wrong before. In the meantime, Toshinori was on his way home in his pickup. He had already decided. Izumi, I hope you and Katsuki recover quickly. When you're ready, we'll start your training. In order to locate Izuku and stop the Green Devil, we need your immense potential. I shouted at her. I ignored her when she tried to assist me. What's the matter with me? Izuku had withdrawn from contemporary society and into the nearby woodland. He closed his eyes and stood still. Abruptly, he lifted his hand and grabbed a green ball of fire. It twisted around when he slung it over his shoulder. The ball eluded him as he cocked his head. Izuku could see his strength circling him below his eyelids, like a second pair of eyes. So it won't really matter if he ever loses his sight. Opening his eyes, he made notes in his notebooks. He made the decision to study and concentrate on the more technical facets of his peculiarity alone for the day. He tried to divert his attention from his interaction with that Yaoyorozu girl, but as he yelled at her, her distressed face kept appearing in his mind. Izuku put down his pen with a groan. He chuckled, perhaps I can burn my own memories. He turned the pages of his notebook over, going over the notes he had made about his day or his power. However, he discovered something that wasn't either. It was a drawing. Drawing added interest to Izuku's notes, and he enjoyed it nearly as much as writing. He performed a Yaoyorozu. Maybe it was to get the guilt from that incident out of his head, but there was more to it. When Izuku saw someone who looked a lot like his grandmother Nana Shimura, he couldn't help but draw comparisons because he had spent hours of his childhood gazing at her photo. Shimura was the subject of the sketch beneath Yaoyorozu. Izuku closed and then opened his eyes. He stared at his palm, his sclera flashing green. His eyes saw it as orange. Thermal vision. Nice. This'll come in handy. Hurry. The sound of a twig snapping caused Izuku to hastily turn around. He leapt to his bag on a solid tree branch and peered in the direction of the sound. Nothing felt warm to him. When he returned to his normal vision, he noticed a guy and a little girl with dark green hair strolling through the woodland. Kids? Since I used to roam around here as well, I shouldn't be shocked. Their heat signature is so subtle that it was invisible to my thermal vision. They must be heartless. Before descending the tree and approaching the children, Izuku put on his mask and a cap. Hey! When the stranger arrived, they both gave a little start and retreated. Her brother extended his arm to shield her as the girl hid behind him. Despite going through a recent emotional roller coaster, Izuku was moved by the loving sibling display he witnessed. He knelt down to try to calm the children. Softly, are you two lost? He inquired. Both of them gave a nod. Izuku turned his sclera green once more as he turned his head away from them and used his thermal vision. He saw an orange blur through the trees. From here, there appears to be a whole group. All right, I can get you back to your group. Follow me. As Izuku began to move, the child grasped his small sister's hand in the hem of his shirt. He said, Thanks. She replied, yeah, thanks. Izuku's gaze grew softer. Before he spoke, he cleared his throat. They both nodded in agreement. You two are siblings, aren't you? Izuku began guiding them out of the woodland while keeping an eye on the future. A woman with snow-white hair and crimson highlights, wearing spectacles, was pacing tensely around a gathering of children at the forest's entrance. Where am I supposed to find them? The older sister of the Asui children will arrive at any moment to collect them. Speaking of the frog, she was approached by a girl with long, dark green hair. Hi Ms. Todoroki. I'm here to pick up my brother and sister. A voice said to them, excuse me, but are these yours? Two frog-like children emerged from behind a masked boy. Satsuki? Samadare? Inquired the elder frog. Sue. They both exclaimed as they rushed to embrace their elder sister. The now named Satsuki and Samadare pulled Sue, out of the embrace and asked, Ribbit, what happened on your field trip? We saw a neat-looking bug, and followed it to see if there were more bugs like it. It was a nice snack, but we got lost, Ribbit. The kid clarified. The female said, and that guy found us. The instructor and Sue glanced at the boy, who appeared to have had a rough night's sleep. The adult bowed and said, thank you so much for bringing them back. Thank you, and sorry for the trouble. My siblings can be a hassle. Sue gave a bow. With minimal emotion, Izuku stated, it's no problem. The 5 of them were left alone while the other children were being picked up by their parents. Izuku said, can I suggest something? Going to a neighboring playground was Izuku's recommendation for a more positive conclusion. The Asui siblings were closely observed by 6 watchful eyes this time, but the younger ones were still allowed to enjoy themselves. Tsuyu placed a finger on Zu's chin and remarked, this was a great idea, Zu. Fuyumi Todoroki replied, yeah, and thanks again for doing my job of looking after these kids. Izuku resentfully remarked, I shouldn't have had to do anything. He cast a sidelong glance at her. You're responsible for them. How could you let them run off like that? You're lucky I was there and not some scumbag. His remarks were harsh but true, and Fuyumi shrank. Izuku felt she was truly sorry for her error and even vowed she would do better. You're right, I'm responsible for them. I should have been more vigilant. Sorry. I'll do better. He became kinder to her. I can't imagine teaching is an easy job with all those curious kids to look after, Ribbit. Even Samadare broke away, and he's one of the older few. Tsuyu replied. Izuku seemed a little tense as Fuyumi asked, so, what were you doing in that forest anyway? He said, I just like the quiet, you seem to know this place well. Are you from here? Sue responded. Zu clamped down on his arm. You might say that. The 3 of them fell into an awkward quiet. Tsuyu and Fuyumi were very interested in Zu's circumstances. Hey Zu? The boy said, glancing at the frog girl with weary, wounded eyes. It was Tsuyu's intimate inquiry that surprised Fuyumi, but Zu didn't respond the same way. I'm the kind of person who says what's on my mind. You look like you have a lot of issues. Do they stem from home? He was quiet for a while. Do you know what it's like to be overlooked and ignored by somebody who's supposed to be there for you? More than you think. Fuyumi made a statement. Izuku covered his face with his bandaged right hand. She inquired anxiously, do you have anything you want to get off your chest? Izuku recalled the last person he had spoken to who had listened to him. A little. He inhaled deeply before starting. I hate my family, I suffered neglect and abuse. I was treated differently for being quirkless. And my sibling got endless attention and praise for being born gifted, same for my old friend. I've tried to understand why, but at this point, I might be better off without them. Tsuyu and Fuyumi were intently listening. He rarely cracked his voice, which was generally flat. That indicated that his grief persisted. Starting with, I know what you mean, Fuyumi says. I don't exactly come from the prettiest family either, and I can relate to having a talented sibling. Izuku gritted his teeth and asked, but have you ever tried to reconnect with them, like trying to talk this through? At the conclusion, he clenched his fist and muttered, more than I can count. My latest attempt was by far the most horrific. That might have been a mistake. Sue and Zu stared at her bewilderedly. Huh? Ribbit? I'm not a licensed therapist, I'm going on instinct, but hear me out. You're not at all wrong for wanting something better from your family, but it's something that all sides have to want. You don't have to be upfront right away, but maybe take some time to think. Do they show any signs of wanting what you want? Are you absolutely sure you know what you want? It's completely up to you what you choose, but I've always found it better to make an informed decision. Watch them and see if you really want to be with that family. Until then, don't revolve entirely around this unpleasant topic. You could find healthy distractions like exercise or reading to keep a healthy psyche. Don't be afraid to put yourself first sometimes. Izuku absorbed all of the woman's words. He felt that returning home wasn't a total error because she was making perfect sense. Even though the truth is heartbreaking, he discovered how his mother feels. He also has a rather accurate assessment on Izumi. That simply leaves. Izuku heard a tap on his shoulder and said, Dad. Tsuyu was the source. Her eyes were compassionate as she asked, you don't have to answer, but what's your family like? Zu combed his hair with his hand. My mom's a pro hero, and my sister wants to be one too. They both have strong quirks. My stepdad works with the police and has a weak strength enhancer. Just enough to make lifting a couch or fridge easy. His mom was a hero, too. Save for my old man. Harrowing is kinda like the family business. Things went off the rails when I was diagnosed as quirkless. I was ignored by my parents, bullied by my sister and best friend, told to off myself. That was the final push I needed to leave. And you know, I can take care of myself better than they bothered to, which speaks volumes about my home life. His remarks caused Tsuyu and Fuyumi's hearts to tighten. They both felt that everyone in a family should be loved, even though they didn't have the ideal lives at home for different reasons. With a groan, Izuku rose from the bench. As he turned to go, he felt a hand gently grasp his right hand. Thanks for the talk, it helped. I'm sorry for being so harsh, Ms. Todoroki. I can only imagine how taxing a job managing a bunch of kids is. He turned to face Sue, who was holding him. To the surprise of Izuku and Fuyumi, she said, "Come stay with us." The Asui sister's suggestion, or perhaps plea, caused Zu's eyes to widen. Ribbit, you don't have to go back to your abusers. They're the ones who turned their backs on you. And you deserve to live in a better place. Fuyumi got up and said, "That means a lot, but I don't want to be a bother to anyone. I still live with my father, but we have comfortable guest rooms. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He's a hero too." The generosity with which these girls treated Izuku warmed his heart. They're giving him options for new residences, a new beginning. He could move on from his traumatic past. However, Izuku is not being offered a place to live with them. They're giving Zu to him. His heart grew icy, and he slowly withdrew from Sue. Zu left the playground with a sad expression in his eyes as he said, "I appreciate it, truly, but I can't accept. I just can't. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. You just worry about your own families. I get the feeling you both are vital to them. I apologize, Asui and Todoroki. However, it will eventually be discovered that I am the Green Devil. I don't want you to pay for protecting a murderous vigilante." In addition, he walked by another billboard for missing persons. He gave the name, Yagi, a fierce glow. "I will never return to that house unless I get my way." A good diversion, isn't it? Perhaps this will be helpful. Zu browsed the news on his phone as he strolled through the quiet area. He was drawn to a headline that he felt was noteworthy. An illegal shipment of unusual drugs is stopped by ingenuity. Then he discovered another that caused his eyes to enlarge: the closure of Aldera Junior High. This school's discriminatory tactics and unethical behavior have come to light, making it an unacceptable setting for developing children. A number of staff members were prosecuted and found guilty of bullying and neglecting a quirkless youngster who had an equal right to an environmentally friendly education as the most talented quirk user. Izuku felt a great relief in his heart. At last, one of his hells was being punished. The teachers finally received the punishment they were due for making him endure. Izuku doesn't want to be healthy, so screw it if this diversion isn't good for you. He recognized a name as he went down to the comments. Yaoyorozu Momo. "I ran into some kids from Aldera at a local shopping mall. One was being harassed by two others, so I went to find an authoritarian to assist. When I returned, the victim seemed to have an intense reaction to the harassment. We conversed, and that's how I learned about the inexcusable behavior fostered in Aldera Junior High." Yaoyorozu. Izuku's eyes were watering as he held his phone shakily. He was aware of her name, her strong, influential name. Izuku continued reading, eventually reaching the names he despises the most: Bakugo and Yagi. "I'm glad there are people like you with power." A small argument was going on. The two are considered to be future heroes by some. Since the Green Devil put them in the hospital, the majority of them are sympathizers. They were exposed as the potential villains there by sensible people. Selfish narcissists who minimize the vulnerable and prioritize themselves. However, these individuals are charged with jealousy. Fuck. Izuku's positive attitude ended when he heard a well-known complaint. In order to view from above, he leapt into a tree. Whether by purpose or by chance, Izuku had made his way back to his former residence, where Toshinori had parked his truck and Izumi and Katsuki had exited. Observe and decide wisely, Todoroki. Alright, let's watch how this develops. Katsuki swore, "Damned uptight bitch." Next to him, Izumi appeared less irate but still furious. Izuku was furious because he understood what his twin sister and old buddy were talking about. Sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. "Thanks to her, our school has a black mark. Yaoyorozu screwed up our hero path over something ridiculous." They were disparaging Yaoyorozu for revealing their miserable school, which was their stomping ground and the location that made learning a nightmare for him. He was already furious over it, but they had the audacity to suggest it was based on false allegations. Perhaps it's absurd because public punching bag number 1 was never seen, because of their enraged ignorance of the harm they did. Especially to him, They disregarded Yaoyorozu's legitimate actions as excesses and completely unneeded. I want to send them back even though they just left the hospital an hour ago. Perhaps a few fractured bones will make everything right. But I want to know, dear old dad, what are you going to do? Izumi and Katsuki's rant had been ignored by the underweight blonde man, who had remained silent. At last, Toshinori turned to face them and exclaimed, Dad, are you listening? This is bullshit, and you know it, uncle, he started by saying, actually, I don't see it that way, Katsuki, which confused the three children who were listening. You two will have to either move to a different school, or start homeschool, but this could be a blessing in disguise. You won't be the first to become heroes after leaving that poor school, but this gives us more time to train you for UA. The patriarch of Yagi lost them at this moment. You? Train us? No offense, UNC, but you'll need something a lot stronger than that puny strength quirk to challenge us. Katsuki exclaimed. Izuku clutched his tree as smoke rose from it due to the utter conceit in his voice. Toshi smiled at him and said, I think I'll be able to suffice, Katsuki. To make sure no one was around eavesdropping, he glanced back and forth. Izuku was really disappointed that his stepdad did not recognize him even though he was aware of his surroundings. You two fought the Green Devil, that outlaw that brutally murdered those four muggers. I don't know much about him or his strange quirk, but it seems to be changing, evolving. If he's as young as you are, he has a lot of room to grow. That could mean trouble for everyone down the line. He needs to be stopped. Izumi and Katsuki completely concurred, and they became I will blast that bastard's fucking head off the next time I see him. He was fortunate, but good fortune is fleeting. Izuku, however, suffered a severe hit to the heart that left a hole in it. After pushing him away, torturing him, and abandoning him, they now have the audacity to discuss him as though he were the bad guy. And for what purpose? To infuse the brats with some much-needed humility. Katsuki and Izumi gazed at him curiously, anticipating a response to the question, put your all into this training, and you two will be more than a match for the Green Devil by the time you start high school. You'll be truly mighty, and do you know why? And it blew them away, boy. The slender Toshinori's muscles grew like balloons as he started to expand. His features grew fuller, and a grin that was incredibly familiar was engraved on his face. Izumi and Bakugo questioned whether they were dreaming because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Izuku prayed that they were all sharing a nightmare. Because I am here, was the catchphrase uttered by All Might in the flesh. Both Izumi and Katsuki were speechless. The hero they had admired their entire lives was in front of them, where Toshinori had previously been. They were unable to breathe, blink, or move normally. All Might went on. That's right, future heroes. It is I, All Might. AKA Toshinori Yagi, father of Izumi Yagi and proud husband to Inko Yagi. AKA Teleki. It was extremely foolish of someone to shout out who he really was in a place where anyone could see him, but Izuku was too devastated and betrayed to stop him. At last, Izumi said, Dad. Katsuki was beginning to panic as well. Why you? I. When, how? All this time. Izuku gathered his breath somewhat more quickly than these two, and that was just after his own run-in with a villain. All Might. Toshi. The hell? All Might had to use chops on the head to physically reset them. It was that. As Katsuki put it, all right, would anyone care to explain the fuck? The smile on All Might's face never faltered. Yeah, Dad, what the hell? You've been All Might this whole time. And Mom knows. When were you going to tell me? It was supposed to be your 14th birthday present, but things got dicey all of a sudden. Izuku gripped his thumping chest, gasping for air and trying to make sense of this new world. His father and All Might are the same individual. The person who crushed his ambitions and the one who disregarded him for a decade are the same person. I am here to train you both. Young Izumi, your telekinesis will one day outshine your mother's. And young Katsuki, your impressive explosions have so much potential. Teleki and I will train you both to reach your peak. Together, we'll stop the vigilante menace known as the Green Devil and save Izuku. And you two will one day become the greatest hero duo of all time. Izumi and Katsuki found great joy at All Might's inspirational speech. The pillar of justice appears and raises them even higher than before, right when they were at their lowest. For you, that's the best hero. Both of them lifted their hands, Katsuki making explosions in his palms and Izumi floating pebbles off the ground. Izuku was experiencing what might have been the worst day of his life. The person he formerly regarded as the greatest hero was praising his tormentors and choosing them to train under him. He covered his wine with a palm over his mouth and clamped his eyes shut. He turned and led Bakugo and Izumi into the home for further explanation as soon as All Might deflated and returned to Toshinori. When he saw Yagi's back once more, he lost something. His mask was burned off his face as soon as he took his hand out of his mouth. He left a flaming fist print on his tree after punching it with his right hand. When Toshinori, Bakugo, and Izumi turned around in response to the commotion, they discovered nothing except smoldering material that was dangerously near the home. Toshi hurried to put out the possible fire. He noticed that the bandage had scorched. That was very close. The entire house might have burned down. Izuku seemed as a green comet as he soared into the late evening sky, the light turning to darkness. With a loud, flaming, smoking smash, he hit the top of the closest building. He staggered to his feet, tears streaming from his eyes. He sobbed, "Damn it. Damn it all." When he opened his eyes, he discovered that he was on the roof of the recently closed Aldera due to some tragic twist of fate. "Go take a swan dive off the roof, you quirkless trash." Before he lost it, he needed one more gut punch. He shrieked, "Dammit," as he pounded the roof and broke the footing beneath him, encasing his right hand in a madly flaming viridescent fist. Everything was crushed as the air conditioners and concrete collapsed onto his former classroom. Izuku felt hardly any pain in the hand he used to do this, hovering over the devastation his emotions had made. Tears continued to fall as he closed his eyes. "No, not anymore. That's it, I'm finished. I saw everything I needed to see when I watched them. I've already decided." Izuku's eyes blazed emerald once more as he opened them. His tears vanished in an instant, and burns that resembled scarves covered his lower face down to his collarbone. The green devil flew into the night with his flames burning so intensely that they would devour every bastard within his reach. "I'm done. I'm done with the Yagis. I'm done with Bakugo. I'm done with All Might. That is my decision. I never had a family, and never needed one," he exclaimed. Household Yagi, 3 a.m. Izumi from her bedroom and headed directly to the restroom. To bring herself back to reality, she splashed water on her face several times. "It's not real. That never took place. He is no longer here." She covered her wet face with a towel after noticing her own reflection. "He'll return when he regains consciousness, but he left. And I'll be waiting to get even with him for causing anxiety in everyone." As she made her way back to her room, she thought. It had been a dreamlike experience the other day. After learning that her father is All Might, she and Kachan decided to start training under the greatest hero in the universe. The following day, she came upon a report about Aldera's roof being destroyed. That did not unearth pleasant memories. She probably had a nightmare about a bloody, bruised, and lifeless Izuku demanding that they play heroes and villains because of that. He claimed that their father would want them to, which was the hardest part. Old man. Izumi and their biological father had some unresolved problems. She didn't remember anything about him, and she would have forgotten his appearance long ago if it weren't for the photos. However, Izuku had a lot of memories. When he was 3 years old, he was intelligent enough to compile their recollections of Hisashi into a book. Izumi had seen it once before, but only once. It was largely Hisashi and Izuku, and her name was rarely spoken. Her plain old man with a weak fire-breathing quirk was not someone she spent enough time with. She didn't find her boring father particularly interesting because her mom was the legendary Teleki. Izumi let out a sigh. She turned on her laptop and called an old acquaintance since she didn't want to go back to sleep and she needed someone to chat to. A girl her age with blue eyes and blonde hair appeared on the screen. "Hi Izumi. What's up? You don't usually call at this time." "Yeah. Well, I didn't want to go back to sleep so I thought I'd call you." "How's your dad?" "Good. Working on something I think you'll be interested in. You know how Tartarus has quirk disrupting radio frequencies that only affect the inmates? My dad's working on cuffs that conceal powers away. Imagine it, the most powerful bad guy, turned quirkless with the click of a cuff." Izumi had begun to feel bad about phoning her pal. The blonde's smile vanished as she said, "Yeah, I can't imagine taking a quirkless villain seriously." Izumi inhaled and considered his words before saying, "Hey, is something wrong? You seem troubled." Some of the baggage she had gathered over the past 40 hours could be heard by someone. "My dad told me something crazy, and no matter what you can't tell anyone." The blonde asked arrogantly, "What, that your dad is All Might?" While laughing into her palm, the blonde exclaimed, "No, that my dad is." "You knew?" Izumi pouted before receiving a call from someone else. "My dad personally made all of his suits from the young age to the golden age. Don't you think I'd eventually be in the loop? And evidently I'm better at keeping secrets." She pressed. "Except. Hold on, Melissa, I'm getting someone else. It's Kachan." His definition of a pleasant good morning is, "Good, you're awake." Melissa winced a little because he was also blonde. "Hey Katsuki, long time no talk." "Hey Blondie." Katsuki huffed as he pulled his head away from the TV and asked, "You had a nightmare, too?" "Of course not. I just couldn't sleep. Simple as that," he answered, suppressing the thought of going to Izuku's burial. Melissa rolled her eyes at the demeaning epithet, but she continued to smile. "Anyway, we start training for UA tomorrow. And Blondie, you get the honor of being our first choice in tech support." Until the sun rose, the three of them discussed the future. Melissa inquired on the status of Japan's newest vigilante at the conclusion. She was only able to gather basic information. It was obviously a sensitive topic. One she would put away for the moment. Department of Police. There seems to be no end to the Green Devil's acts of cruelty. Within the past 24 hours, more than 20 low-ranked criminals have been found broken and mangled in the alleys of Musutafu. The majority of them suffered broken bones, dislocation in various joints, third-degree burns and internal bleeding. Tsukachi sighed at his desk and shut off the news on his TV. He was overburdened with labor attempting to apprehend an outlaw who appeared to be becoming more violent and vicious every day. If his victims weren't so severely traumatized that they were effectively silent, that would be excellent. At that moment, one of the detective's less experienced cops entered. "Sir, we have one who sustained consciousness, but..." "Let me guess, he won't talk," Tsukachi murmured. Tsukachi raised his head from his desk and asked a questioning gaze. "And not exactly, sir. It's more like he can't talk." "What do you mean he can't talk? Is the devil threatening to kill him?" "Tell him we can offer protection in exchange for any information." The cop nodded. "No sir, he literally cannot talk right now. The Green Devil broke his face. I'm talking fractured skull, broken nose, missing teeth and dislocated jaw. There's also signs that he was strangled because his voice is so hoarse and rough, to the point of sounding like rubbing sandpaper on a desk." Tsukachi's jaw dropped open in shock. The description must have been less graphic than the real scene. How could a child be so cold-hearted, he thought. "Sir, this vigilante, something changed in him. He's more active and much more violent. At this rate, it won't be long before the heroes have to intervene." A reality that Tsukachi feared. "Keep looking. I want to bring him in before that happens." "Yes sir." The day after all might promise to start teaching Izumi and Bakugo, Tsukachi didn't act unaware that the Green Devil had begun brutally beating criminals to death. The Green Devil, dressed in a black hoodie with green accents, soared over the city. With the flames holding him aloft, he donned black combat boots and black jeans. His entire group was covered in soot. Like his eyes, which hardly had pupils visible, the lower portion of his face was shrouded in a green fire mask. Over his forehead, the hair stood on end. His time was devoted to finding whatever scummy throats he could get his paws on. He did it to prevent himself from seeing the individuals he truly wanted to see in a broken state. Unfortunately, he couldn't. The creatures that destroyed his youth were still being pampered by All Might and Teleki. He could see for himself that nothing had changed. Rising black smoke drew his attention. He thought grimly, "Let's get this over with." A criminal stood over a fat, bald man who was on the ground with blood on his head. Other onlookers were trapped by burning rubbish in a corner. The thief grinned in response to the man's question. "Why are you doing this?" He was a tall, burly man with pink hair and war paint like red marks on his face. The culprit changed his left hand into a blade and prepared to cut the poor man's throat, saying, "I just want to make a new friend. And you know what? I think you'll make a good present when he finally gets here. Please, no." The hot alley felt suddenly frigid. The other onlookers were surrounded by green flames. When the criminal realized what this meant, he grinned. "He's here." A huge fireball struck the culprit, knocking him down as the flames opened up to let the others to flee. The demon and his summoner were the only ones left after the man on the floor was able to eventually get away. The thief grinned and said, "I thought I'd need a sacrifice to get you, but this works too." Izuku lit a blazing fire in his palm. The criminal extended his hands before him. "Hey easy, kid. I want to talk, not fight." Izuku was interested by this. Kill him, or run, were his usual responses when he came across villains, but for some reason, he let his fire wane a little. "Join me," the Green Devil said, his eyes widening and his head tilting slightly. His lips was hanging, but you couldn't tell. "You've got one hell of a quirk, and you know how to use it. You'd be surprised at how hard that is to come by. And yeah, you may be doing the hero's job, but how long do you think until you've taken their spotlight enough for them to want you gone? But with me, with us, You'll have more friends to help you out. You get to do whatever you want and enjoy the perks of being on the winning team. What do you say? With his legs bent and his claws clawed in front of him, ready to launch green fireballs, the Green Devil assumed a hunched figure. Hell no. He hurled the hot orbs at the criminal, who then used his bladed arm to sever them. Around him drifted green embers. Damn, ain't that disappointing? Then the embers suddenly encircled him in a chilly, flaming type of bondage. He couldn't raise his arm blade to cut free since the binding was so tight. The man's confidence shot through the roof as his heart began to race. He's strong, unfortunately. I hoped I wouldn't require this. If I had taken the boss without it, he would have been quite impressed, but whatever. Out of the corner of the Green Devil's eye, he saw the thug moving while he was retrieving his phone from his zip pocket. Using his right hand, he extracted an enigmatic syringe from his pocket and inserted it into his thigh through his trousers. Izuku tried to grip the criminal tighter with more condensed icy flames, but it was ineffective. Sorry kid, but you're the one who chose to play hero when you shouldn't have. With his newly acquired strength, the bastard sliced through, turning both of his arms into blades. Oh, that's that good shit. Suck it, Kale, you Bush League superfood. The Green Devil reacted angrily to this unexpected development. The man was now drooling, his eyes were bloodshot, his veins pulsating, and he had a crazy grin on his face. Additionally, his attitude shifted to that of a delighted anarchist hell-bent on doing havoc. Above all, his eccentricity appears to have been enhanced. He can do it to his arms instead of merely turning his hands into razor-sharp razors. What's wrong, kid? Scared? Izuku was about to be impaled when the madman lunged at him. Izuku attempted to create a barrier of flame, but it was unsuccessful. The man sliced clean through it, barely scraping his cheek in the process. While the man still had momentum, the Green Devil gave him a roundhouse kick. Izuku retreated to gain some space after he collapsed. In a flash, he assessed the situation. He increased his power by using a medication. You made a mistake, damn you, Ingenium. When under the influence of that power booster, he won't be intimidated by cold flames, and my barriers are vulnerable to sharp items. He must have a good shield made of the metal on his arms. This isn't a great matchup for me. The bastard turned back to the vigilante who had knocked him down after shaking his head. All right, Rugrat, let's go. Give me all you've got. Izuku threw flames into his fists. Just to have the opportunity to speak with me, he put innocent people in danger. He said he had friends and wanted to recruit me. In case things don't work out, he even has a secret weapon. This man is an actual villain. When the adversary lunged at Izuku once more, his mental monologue was interrupted. Hovering above his opponent, the Green Devil rolled to the side. I still have aerial mobility and long-range attacks. Until he can no longer stand it, I'll fry him from above. Then perhaps learn more about his pals. Izuku threw blazing hot flames from both hands at the adversary, who was completely consumed by the heat. AAHHRRGGGHH. The roar of the heat that was engulfing his body echoed his agonized screams. Like the night he freed his heat, Izuku was taking care not to burn him. This time won't be like that as long as I'm focused on keeping the temperature under control. When he stops talking, I'll crash. Smash. A metal monster interrupted him by leaping onto a nearby wall and then leaping off of it to strike his abdomen with a powerful blow. Izuku screamed in agony as he struck the wall next to him and fell to the floor. The blow was so powerful that it caused him to throw up blood. The impact was so strong that it fell directly in front of him. In the moonlight, he saw the villain in full body metal armor, gleaming like a sharpened blade and leaking smoke from the thin cracks in the air. His skull, knees, toes, elbows, shoulders, and knuckles were all spiky and threatening. Thanks for the little warm-up, runt. Now die, he said, lifting his right hand and transforming it into a very damaging, spiky wrecking ball. A whole second before he turned into a scarlet stain on the floor, Izuku set fire to shove himself out of the danger. Oh no, he received more support than I anticipated. He is out for blood and is quite different from the man I previously encountered. Before trying to swing again, the villain took a few seconds to extract his wrecking ball fist from the crater it had created. Izuku avoided the assault. Izuku was smaller, faster, and more nimble than the villain, who was several leagues stronger than him. It is nearly hard to catch such a little and fast target with such a big and massive augmentation. Izuku took advantage of that. He sped in the direction of the villain and struck his armored midsection. What's that supposed to do? This. Izuku threw himself off the ground with all of his strength, holding the villain in his arms, setting the alley on fire in his wake. Before he flipped and threw the enemy back down into the alley, he managed to get above the roofs. There was a thundering thud as he fell on his back. Izuku came down with two big fire-filled fists, but he wasn't finished. He delivered a barrage of strikes to the villain's midriff with merciless repetition. With an enormous blow, he brought the already brilliant alley even brighter with his final punch. Having used a good deal of strength, he blew and huffed in the air. But when the smoke cleared, the villain remained upright, little fazed by the assaults. Izuku was left startled and unable to speak. How sad. I expected a devil to give me hell. Don't tell me that's all you've got. The entire attack had seemed insignificant to him. The villain had already jumped off the ground with enough force to generate severe wind pressure before he had time to goggle in disbelief. He attempted to strike the green devil out of the sky by cocking his left hand back. He just missed, brushing across a few hair tufts instead. After spinning to get above the enemy, the green flame user punched him in the back with another fire fist. There was a green explosion and fiercely burning flames as they both fell to the earth. Consider Izuku. It's impossible to predict how long the drug will take to wear off, and he won't allow you enough time to try to get past his defenses. In an attempt to restrain the green devil, the villain swung himself up and struck him. The villain walked nonchalantly to the devil at the end of the alleyway and said, "It's a shame, really. You could have been something great." Despite firing a massive surge of flames from both hands, Izuku continued to move forward. Izuku attempted to use condensed flames to bind his feet, saying, "Your quirk is useful, and can probably do a lot. But you picked the wrong side. The one that will eventually betray you." The villain sprang at him, effortlessly escaping the bonds, saying, "Strong enough to have it all. Too weak to take it. Gorge." He violently thrust his left hand into Izuku's abdomen. After spewing up an alarming amount of blood, the greenette collapses on the villain's arm. The flames that had obscured his face vanished, and his entire body became limp. As the effects of the quirk drug and the adrenaline from the struggle wore off, the villain started to breathe heavily. He proudly glanced down at his prize. His twisted grin and half of his face were exposed when the armor on his face cracked. "Don't worry, brat. I won't kill ya. Even if I wanted to, it's not up to me. Let's try recruitment later when we've both cooled down. Hee. I already said no, huh? Uck." The villain saw that the armor covering his stomach had brillianed and flaked off when he looked down. And a flaming blade above the green devil's hand was in his stomach. As it happens, Izuku's previous attacks weren't in vain. The villain was simply too inebriated to realize the harm he was causing, not that he was unharmed. His armor was weakened by the force of the hits and the extreme heat. All Izuku needed to do was wait for his haste to come to an end. And he's done now that the medicine has started to wear off. The villain's sensation of fear grew when the flames in his eyes and on his lower face flared up again. "Your sharp blades were a good counter. You should have continued using them rather than using force. This is an excellent finisher." The man vomited a lot of blood as Izuku's blazing hot hand blade went even further into his stomach. He felt himself burning from the inside out, even if the majority of his body was still protected by armor. In a desperate attempt to draw away, Izuku kept his hand hot and sharp. The man screamed, "Arrrhhhh," as his internal organs caught fire. The green devil's palm was burning hot as he reached up for the man's throat. With a grunt, Izuku raised the temperature and output of his flames until the villain's eyes and mouth were spewing green flames. Izuku put his foot on his chest and, still attached to it, pushed his body to the ground. The man was completely consumed by the devil's lustrous fire. Izuku found himself standing over a pile of burnt meat and brittle metal when the smoke finally cleared and the light faded. By now, the villain was utterly unrecognizable. They melted his eyeballs out of their sockets. Anyone who dared to look could see the bones of his neck where his throat had been burned. The flesh on his lower jaw was completely gone, and his pink hair was scorched away. A partially cremated body was found on the alley's floor. Izuku inhaled the pungent, recognizable smell of a newly burned corpse. However, this time was different from the last. Yes, he did purposefully kill a man, but it was necessary for him to live. He inhaled once more, this time a few of his own flames. He was able to recover part of his strength by absorbing the cold ones into himself. He left behind what appeared to be a gateway to the viridescent hell with a recently sacrificed human as he hovered off the ground and took off into the night sky. Although he was unaware of it, the individuals he rescued just moved out of the line of fire. The entire event was captured on tape by one of them. He inspected his own injuries while the green devil flew. He was punched, and the left side of his stomach and belly had a big bruise. And a cut at the start of the fight on his cheek. He couldn't help but think about what the man had said, even if he wanted to feel happy of himself for his first significant takedown. The antagonist had made it apparent that he was a member of a gang or other group. Additionally, they were expanding their numbers through recruitment. He must be much more careful to clean up the filth on the street if that is the case. Even if I wanted to kill Ya, it's not up to me. He was only a pawn, not the boss villain. A pawn with illegal narcotics who poses a threat. What additional people might there be? And what does this employer, whomever he is, want from me? His thoughts were weighty, and he started to lose altitude. The villain's statements stuck. He was already being pursued by the cops. How long before the heroes did the same? The antagonist made it apparent that he is opposed to them if he is not on their side. A target has now been placed on Izuku's back. One each for Izuku Yagi and the Green Devil. Beautiful. To be honest, the boy has no idea what might be worse. Either returning to that house or being tortured by baddies. Izuku fell hard onto the pavement in front of a hospital and collapsed on the bench nearby. He had just survived a life or death struggle and had been up for more than 24 hours. He needed to sleep. Hopefully, nobody will disturb him before he awakens. In other places, a man who had just finished watching the fight between the Green Devil and the Blade Formation user clapped, saying, "You performed better than I anticipated. Up until the villain's head was consumed by flames, he had witnessed everything. I knew you would prevail, Izuku, but I never expected you to end it off so gruesomely. You have my praise." Although, and this may be an unfair comparison, Endeavor would have finished this fight even quicker. Your flames weren't quite burning with the same intensity as the night you faced your old friend, mother and sister. But that's fine. It's clear that when you're pushed to your limit, you can adapt, learn, evolve and keep fighting. It fills me with awe to see your true potential breaking out. Potential I can't wait to see realized. Until then, I will happily provide you with the environmental conditions you need to be your best. Other fire users will pale in comparison to you. I'm looking forward to it, my boy. Izuku groaned as he awoke, feeling weighed down. He smelled like burning and blood in his morning breath. The sky was blue in the morning when he opened his eyes. He became more conscious and saw that he was wearing the compression shirt underneath his hoodie. His head was raised by a gray pillow and a soft, snow-white blanket that were spread over him. Beside the bench he slept on, a quiet voice said, hello." Izuku turned to see a woman with gray eyes and white hair who appeared anxious. Izuku raised his defenses and said, hi. Although everything appeared much cleaner, he noticed that she was clutching his black and green hoodie. When she saw where his eyes were, the woman gave a little start. She shoved it into his hands and whispered, sorry, this is yours." Izuku took his possession and turned back to face the anxiously twitching woman. Izuku pulled his compression shirt to reveal bandages and the odor of ointment on his bruised abdomen. "I found you on the bench looking hurt, so I tried to help." In addition, he could feel a cut on his cheek. She made the effort to assist a total stranger herself. She could receive assistance from the hospital that is directly in front of us. Izuku's stomach began to growl before he could respond. "Do you need anything else?" To acquire some nourishment, the white-haired woman hurried into the hospital. With a groan, Izuku replaced his hoodie. "Is she a nurse or a patient here? She doesn't appear to be fully present, but, well, at least she's nice." Izuku paused to look around. He became aware of something that shocked and saddened him. He is seated outside the hospital where his father was employed. "Dad." Izuku gripped his chest, trying to stop his heart from exploding. With a few tears streaming down his eyes, he sat up and hunched over. Then he felt two hands on his shoulders and something fluffy and fuzzy on his back. He turned to see the woman who had assisted him had come back, covered him with the blanket, and was massaging his shoulders in an attempt to soothe him. Gently. "What's wrong?" she inquired. Izuku inhaled deeply before briefly lowering the walls. He told the woman that he was in a really tough situation in a quiet, choked voice. With a bowl of soup in her lap, the woman sat down on the seat beside him and said, "My dad used to work here. I miss him." She said, "What was he like?" The question startled Izuku, but he didn't push her away. "Nice. Really nice. He taught me how to read and write. He always made good meals. I miss my dad." He shed another tear that the woman wiped off his cheek. Then she extended the soup bowl for him to grab. At last, she gave her name. "My name is Ray." Zoo. He took the dish and started to eat. Ray remained by his side the entire time. Izuku felt oddly at peace with the woman all morning long. Upon discovering him injured and abandoned, she provided him with food, comfort, and an outlet. She knew he needed that, but he never asked for it. Additionally, she avoided involving the hospital staff, which could have jeopardized his identification. Does being a mother feel like this? It's pleasant. Then an idea suddenly came to him. His face was visible to Rei. He didn't have a mask or hair color to hide himself. He resembles the missing person posters exactly, save for the scar on his right cheek and the bags beneath his eyes. In spite of this, Rei appeared to know nothing about him. She isn't quite perfect, to be sure. Then with Izuku, it clicked. She must be a patient in a mental health facility. She appears to be healthy and uninjured, which would account for her hospitalization. Izuku handed the bowl of soup to Rei after finishing his own. Zu put a hand on his stomach and said, "Thank you very much, Ms. Rei." "You're welcome. Can I ask how you got hurt?" He glanced down at his feet and said, "I didn't have anyone looking out for me." Rei scowled and got to her feet. She returned inside and said, "I'll get you a water." She returned shortly after, carrying a huge glass of water, but there was no Zu to be seen. The blanket and pillow she gave him were the only items she could see remaining on the bench. Energized but somewhat deflated, Izuku leapt over the roofs. Maybe it was abandoning the first person to show him a little motherly love. Maybe it was the realization that you had killed someone else. He may have had injuries that had not yet fully healed. In any event, he felt well enough to move before he was in danger once more. After landing on the ground, he wore his hoodie to conceal his hair and left an alley. He reached for his bright yellow backpack as well. Right where I left it. He was becoming rather accustomed to Musudafu's back alleyways. Once more, Zu strolled among the crowds and noticed something unsettling. The number of patrolling cops and professionals increased. In a place he had never witnessed so much interest. Izuku made an effort to remain silent and avoid arousing suspicion. He continued walking until he came across some startling news on a big TV on a skyscraper. The Green Devil's barbarism seems to know no bounds. Even other criminals are seeking him for his power, and suffer agonizing deaths. This is video footage from just last night. The following image is extremely disturbing, and it is advised that all minors look away. A video clip of the Green Devil penetrating the superpowered villain and horribly burning him to death from the inside was shown on the news. Many wanderers looked away, gasped, or gagged. After that, the focus of the news shifted to those who had seen the incident. A woman who was formerly endangered. It was brutal from start to finish. That villain with metal armor had a quirk booster drug. He was a monster. The devil was beaten bloody by that guy, until he managed to go for the kill. The sound of those roaring flames, the agonizing screams, the loud crashing. Those sounds haunt my nightmares. Adolescent blogger. That was the sickest fight I've ever seen. The Green Devil was getting his ass kicked and I thought he was dead, then we'd all be dead. But then the guy starts looking like a wraith from hell. That takedown is gonna bring me so many followers. The guy's a hero. Oh, and he saved my life, too. Why don't the heroes do sick executions like that? We'd have less shitbags on the street. Man in his middle years. I don't know much about that young man, and I can't say I condone his methods. But he saved my life. Unlike the pros, he acted knowing he would receive no reward, risking his life for a complete stranger. He nearly died in that fight for us. For me. If you can see me, boy, please know I'm extremely grateful to you. If the heroes arrest you, or you turn yourself in, I hope you channel your power toward helping people in a more acceptable manner. Izuku felt the weight of his heart begin to ease. Even though he himself believes that some of his work shouldn't be accepted, it was good to see that it was valued. Specifically, being the local walking crematorium. The news reporter's screen returned, and she concluded by stating that a dangerous youngster is still a child. Before he goes too far, he needs assistance. Zu dismissed the billboard TV with a sneer. I was pushed that far if I do end up crossing that line. The following day the streets have been silent ever since the news broke of the Green Devil's cruel execution. Although there was no suspicious activity to look into, there were more police officers and heroes on patrol. It appears that the heroes sensed the terror that Izuku had instilled in the criminal realm. Rei didn't feel this growth much, if at all. She was not permitted to be more than 10 feet from the hospital, and her room lacked a television. That's how worried they were about keeping her steady. She would take a short walk and get some fresh air at the same time every morning and evening. Before she had to return inside, she had approximately an hour of free time, which she always made the most of. She was taking a stroll in the evening when she noticed a head of green hair leaning against the wall and automatically went over to it. Izuku inhaled through his nose and exhaled. Reaching into his pocket, he took out a little photograph of Hisashi. When he heard footsteps approaching, he put it back in his pocket and said, "I miss you, Dad." When the temperature dropped to a comfortable cold, he became somewhat calmer. She said, "Hello." To him. "Hi. What are you doing back here?" Izuku simply sighed. lacking the strength to send her on her way. I wanted to visit the place my dad worked. Don't have anywhere else I want to remember him. Beside him, Ray took a seat. What about your home? Zu said, giving him a tight grip. He put his head in his knees and said, they don't need me. His emotions caused his body to start heating up. He didn't try to stop it, but he didn't do it intentionally. It's okay if the heat made Ray leave. He felt a chilly touch on his back instead of hearing her shuffle away. When he looked up, he noticed that Ray had started to use her quirk to prevent him from becoming too heated. I don't think that's true. Izuku stared at her, shocked by what she had started. When he reached a comfortable temperature, Ray withdrew her hand, which was dripping with icy mist. A peculiarity of frost. Appropriate for someone who can calm him. My family isn't the prettiest either, but not everyone is bad. Isn't there someone in yours you've turned to for help? Izuku remained silent for a while. When Ray stated that, two figures instantly came to mind. Hisashi and Nana. His grandma and father are dead. Unaware of it, he allowed a tear to fall down his cheek. Ray was present to remove it. Izuku covered his face with his scarred right palm and said, there was. But I ended up stuck with the worst of them until I couldn't take it anymore. Ray instinctively put an arm around his head and pulled him into her. Around Zu, her maternal instincts took over. Izuku found that sitting quietly while being held by a kind woman was helpful. Although he feels that Ray wouldn't mind, he would have stayed there all night if he could have, but a staff member emerged to seek for her. Ray was discovered dozing on the floor, and Izuku had escaped in time. After being awakened, she was sent to her room. The nurse scorned her gently, but she felt no regret. All she could sense was, I hope you continue to visit, Zu. Concern. Department of Police and officer rushed into the detective's office and exclaimed, Sukachi, sir. Or so. With an empty coffee mug on his desk, he frantically said, what is it? Who's dead now? One of our own. A week has passed since the Green Devil was brutally murdered, and the police and heroes have been working non-stop to apprehend him. The cop shamefully confessed, Sir, I met the Green Devil. I attempted to arrest him, but he used his fear fire and threw me off. It was his co-worker that Sukachi was most worried about. He was on the streets by himself with a killer. He didn't appear to be physically hurt, though, unlike others. What happened, sir? He didn't do anything. He shot cold flames at me and disappeared from my line of sight. I was honestly expecting to die, but here I am. Sukachi was taken aback by this. Another thing happened to the vigilante. It has nothing to do with the Yagas this time. In fact, the vigilante grew softer. Perhaps he is on the path to recovery, but this is just wishful thinking. Hopefully, a good hero can persuade him to come in peace so we can provide him with a better life. It's definitely wishful thinking. Izuku would keep going to the hospital where his father used to work during the course of the following 2 weeks. Initially, it was only to give him the impression that he was still with him. He soon realized, though, that it was to see Ray. They spent several evenings together, conversing, eating, and spending time together. Sharing a bowl of soup under the orange and pink evening sky was always pleasant. As the mother figure Izuku was lacking, Ray had swiftly won his affection. She allowed him to express how miserable his life was. He told her almost everything, although he kept some things private, such as his vigilantism, his misdiagnosis, and who All Might was. And having someone to lighten his emotions was really pleasant. He reciprocated by listening to Ray when she wanted to chat. Izuku found out about her family and how she was essentially sold to Endeavor, who used her as a baby machine to fulfill his ambition of outperforming All Might. She ended herself in a psychiatric hospital because her previous life, which was extremely stressful, broke her psyche. She must now deal with the shame of leaving her youngest kid scarred. That night, Izuku allowed her to weep on his shoulder. Izuku experienced a fresh wave of animosity for the number 2 hero as Ray sobbed. Creating offspring just to make yourself look good. Then throwing away your own work because it doesn't live up to your expectations. How is it possible for someone like him to be a hero? To make matters worse, he was pursuing a massive hypocrite. When it comes to fatherhood, he and All Might aren't all that different. With the exception of Izumi and Bakugo, Izuku now views the top 2 heroes as the top 2 scumbags. He was holding Ray when his body started to burn. Ray didn't try to calm him down with her quirk. When she realized Zu had a heat quirk, it made her think of Enji, which made her nervous. However, she saw a dejected and hurt boy. Open, untreated wounds were the source of that burning. She chose to cure them and was never burned. It was quite different from Endeavor, but she allowed herself to be held by the heat of a fire quirk user for the first time in years. This heat was safe, cozy, and perfectly balanced in terms of temperature. Each other provided them with much-needed solace. "Hello, Dad. I apologize for not speaking with you recently. I've been distracted. Though it draws the wrong kind of attention, I have an incredible quirk. I don't even believe I want to be among the right bunch anymore. I am aware that Grandma and you were disappointed with me. However, I honestly doubt that I will ever be able to return to my former self. Complete strangers treat me far better than the Yagas did, yet they continue to favor their only child. I'll work things out, but I'm not sure what to do." After completing his prayer, Izuku got up from his knees. He wiped away a few tears that trickled down his cheeks. He was on the hospital's roof. He concluded that it would be a suitable location for uninterrupted prayer to Hisashi. He could then leap down and start talking to Rei in the evening, which would be the high point of his day. A little clearer, he made his way to the building's edge. But he was halted by a voice. A voice that was all too familiar. "Hey, what do you think you're doing, on patrol?" Teleki was flying over the streets. Although her mission was to stop any illegal activity she saw, she had her sights set on locating the Green Devil for herself. As soon as she arrived at the hospital where her late husband worked, she wanted to turn away. She saw a young guy in a black and green hoodie making his way to the roof's edge before she made an effort to disregard her past. Before he could jump, she flew after him. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" After a brief moment of hesitation, the youngster disregarded her and carried on going. She was disregarded once more, and the youngster was on the verge of losing his temper. "Did you hear me? Stop. This isn't the answer," she said. With no other choice, Inko held the youngster in midair and steadily drew him closer to her using her telekinesis. It was an error. Suddenly, the person she was holding shot swiftly in her direction. She took a direct elbow to the nose before she could respond. She let go of the youngster due to the intensity of the strike, and she paused to flinch in agony. She looked at the person who had hit her, who was suddenly floating in midair on green flames. Her nose bloodied now. "Don't think for a moment I'll go anywhere with you, hero," he hissed. Ignoring the discomfort, Teleki gave the vigilante in front of him a vile gaze. Green Devil. People around stared up into the sky in disbelief. The pro-hero Teleki and the Green Devil are at odds. Fearful of the impending combat, they took care to retreat a few paces. The Green Devil held his arms by his sides as Teleki lifted her fists. She snarled, "What are you doing here, monster?" The devil sent her a sneer in return. Izuku turned away from her this time and started to take off, saying, "Like you need to know. I was just leaving." "No, you don't." Inko reached out and caught him before he could go very far. She swiftly spun him around and pulled him in. How depressing. Izuku was hovering alone again after releasing flames from his chest that broke Inko's telekinetic hold. Inko made another unsuccessful attempt to seize him. She aimed for his leg, but her grasp was neutralized as flames also came off of it. The flames emanating from his chest formed a cross that reached to his back. "You're a fairly high-ranked pro with an impressive quirk. I bet you never imagined someone could counter your power, Teleki. This part of my power is directly inherited from you, which disgusts me, but it will have to do. I will simply enjoy the fact that you were unable to touch me at this time." As she screamed at her own son, a vein protruded from her forehead. "You can thank your idiot daughter. That experience pushed me to come up with this telekinetic negation. Don't you dare talk about my child." Izuku ducked, allowing Inko to collide with a hospital air conditioner on the roof. So reckless. Picking herself up, Inko charged once more. Izuku ducked under her flailing arms with ease. Teleki is much better from a distance, but she is becoming sloppy and predictable due to her anger and resentment. She hit the zone button and said, "Have you no shame? Attacking two lone youths in the dark. And what did you do to my son? She ought not to have done that." The Green Devil twisted her arm after catching one of her fists. The devil spoke directly into Teleki's ear as she screamed in agony. Before kicking her, I asked, "Who the hell are you talking about?" Teleki gripped her right arm tightly. Her fist was blazing, and it hurt more than she thought a boy would. The vigilante was looking at her with hatred from above, and she looked up at him. His fists were clenched in barely contained rage. "You did nothing to stop your nephew and your stupid daughter from attacking me for years. You can't take the time to think, so you're directing your guilt toward me after pushing me away. Don't you dare approach me like a hero and declare justice." She flies up to him, readying her fists once more, blinded by rage and unaware of his inner monologue. "Stupid." Izuku's whole body erupted in flames as soon as she got close enough, wiping off Inko's telekinetic flight. She was grabbed by the throat and nearly collided with the Green Devil before she could fall. Having to look into the Emerald Demon's burning eyes was already terrible. However, his crushing hold on her throat made breathing nearly impossible due to his condensed heat. You and your daughter really are alike, in the way you both fight like naive children, as if you'll win because you want to so badly. You know I can negate your power, yet you came charging at me carelessly. Charging like a mad bull seeing red, that's the kind of thoughtless maneuver I'd expect from All Might. After giving his mother a strong kick to the stomach, Izuku blasted her with fire, scorching most of her body before she crashed into the wall of a nearby building. She was trapped by the flames that encircled her. Hero, stay put. Your fucking ego is not the most important thing I have to deal with. An empty bottle was tossed at Izuku just as he was ready to go. He glanced back at Inko after barely avoiding it. She had enough arm movement to pick up a dumpster and throw its contents at him. You simply don't know when to give up. Despite her admirable resolve, she was condemned to fail from the beginning of this battle. He was able to sidestep so fast that every shot she fired missed by a mile. Inko eventually became so irate that he threw the full dumpster at him. Please? Izuku sneered as he held out both hands, and two enormous, blazing copies easily grabbed the dumpster and smashed it. Izuku glanced down at his mother with contempt and dejection as the partially melted and crushed dumpster hit the ground with a loud thud. He was genuinely saddened by this. Inko was forced to take drastic action as a result. Cracks appeared around her hand as she pressed it against the wall to which she was adhered. Izuku wondered what she was doing because it appeared to require a lot of work on her part, even if it would eventually be in vain. She freed herself and gave herself stronger ammunition to throw by tearing down the wall she was affixed to. With nothing else in mind than to defeat the Green Devil, she threw pieces of cement at him. The latter continued to sidestep with ease, his sharp eyes readily reading her next move. You're right, become angry. The fact that I'm correct is what you're battling now, not me. You attack me in a fruitless attempt to lighten the load since you'll stop at nothing to avoid taking responsibility for your past errors and bad decisions. My feelings for you and your family are far greater than the hatred you harbor inside of you. When we met, that's what motivated me to murder those gutter punks. So, keep going. To get to me, keep destroying everything in your path. Because you're actually just damaging your own reputation. The Green Devil then lifted his right hand and forged a blazing hot blade out of the inferno surrounding Ida, the identical blade that incinerated the drugged-up villain's insides. As he skillfully and effortlessly cut and diced the bricks she hurled into pebbles, Inko watched in astonishment and mounting terror. As the Green Devil assessed her, Teleki froze for a time. He enjoyed the terror that was etched on her face. What's wrong? Why aren't you attacking? Lost your nerve after seeing I'm not the street punk you were expecting? Hardly a surprise that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. It was the same with those brats you coddle. The second they saw I was in a different class, they cowered like gutless weaklings. So, what about you? Who will you cower behind, hero? Izuku knew just what to say to send his disheartened mother into yet another rage, so he chose his words carefully. Watching her struggle ineffectively was simply too entertaining, and it was a fantastic way for her to make up for the years of misery brought on by her negligence. Izuku effortlessly avoided the massive chunk that Teleki launched at him when he tore it away from the building. She tore out large chunks of structures and threw them at her target 5 more times in a futile attempt to accomplish the same goal. The attacks were either sidestepped or cut in half by the demon. He made the decision to show Inko something that would stick in her memory on the 6th one. He should never be likened to the street vermin she's accustomed to fighting, she says, in yet another demonstration of their disparity in power. Teleki's eyes widened as Izuku did something that caused his ham blade to return to its native fire condition. I've studied this move of his in great detail. It's time to give it a try. Before he fired, the flames encircled his entire forearm and became brighter as they condensed. Is that jet burn? Flash fire fist. When Izuku's fist struck the stone fragment, it exploded in a blaze of blazing heat. The region became significantly hotter as the impact's tremendous heat surged through the streets. I hadn't anticipated exerting that much strength, huh? Even though I hate you, you can use your moves on someone who has my quirk. For example, distinguishing myself from the filth that your heroes take great pride in clearing out. Inko, meanwhile, looked up with fresh terror. That is a flashfire. The best method used by Endeavor. How was he able to? How can a juvenile vigilante employ his methods? She was at last beginning to understand that Izuku should not be treated lightly. It was sensed by Izuku. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, which was telling him everything she was feeling. Anger, annoyance, and fear. With a "come at me" motion, he lifted his hand and flicked his fingers in his direction. Inko played along with this game because she had few other options. He chopped some small rocks, which she picked up and hurled at him. She continued to approach, but the emerald monster was still able to avoid her. She was clearly becoming desperate. This is becoming grating. A flame shot out of his whole body. Inko's grip vanished as soon as the pebbles made contact with it, and they dropped to the hospital porch. In the meantime, Rei and her nurse were arguing over going outside. Rei was intended to introduce Zu to her nurse on this day. She wanted to help since she knew he was badly wounded. It would have been good to have some one-on-one therapy if he was open. Regretfully, she chose the night when Teleki and the Green Devil got into their altercation, if you can call it that, outside the hospital. The nurse pleaded with Rei, "Please, Rei, it's dangerous out there," as she restrained her from running outside. Rei freed her arm and hurried out the hospital doors, saying, "I have to make sure Zu is okay. He's waiting for me." She exclaimed, "Zu," for the first person she had felt a strong bond with in a long time. The emerald demon in the sky heard her voice. She searched the area for the green-haired boy but was unable to locate him. Sadly, she happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong moment. When one of the falling brick pieces struck her head, she was knocked off her feet by the abrupt, intense agony. In pain, she gripped her injured head. When Izuku witnessed the woman he had grown to regard as a mother figure in his life get hurt, he was paralyzed. But Teleki was so preoccupied with the Green Devil that she only gave a damn when he stopped moving. He didn't move an inch when she flew back to him and gave him a strong right hook to the cheek. His full attention was now on the unfortunate ice woman on the ground below them. Blood poured down Rei's head as she shifted her hands. Izuku's heart froze in an instant. She was wounded. His mother figure was wounded. He was saddened by the person who had done so much for him over the past 2 weeks, due to. Inko pulled back and tried again after realizing her punch was ineffectual, but her hand was seized once more. Rei is wounded and hurt. She came here by endeavor. And you? To stroke your ego, you started a quarrel while I wasn't even trying to help. When she shouted, you didn't even bat an eye, and yet. Inko's knuckles began to burn once more, but this time it was much worse. Her hand was melting off the skin. She made an ineffective attempt to draw away. Her bones began to hurt from the pressure as the Green Devil's hold tightened. With a low, terrifying growl, he said, "Izuku Yagi." Teleki hesitated for a second. "Does he recognize my name? Who is this man? Tell me something." Teleki screamed in excruciating pain as her hand was crushed by flaming green flames, causing her bones to break and blood to spray out. She was at the center of a gigantic pillar of fire that burst from him as he screamed, "How can you call yourself a hero with a straight face?" As her outfit burned from the sleeves to the bottom of her knees, the helplessness he had given her returned. The roundhouse kicked her away and swiftly followed when the demon released his hold on her hand, so she didn't burn for long. Izuku yelled, "Scumbag hypocrite," as he withdrew his arm and hurled a massive fire fist that was larger than Teleki's entire body. The impact and searing pain rocked her completely, causing her to scream once more. Izuku dragged her to him and started beating her with hands covered in flames, saying, "You can't even call yourself a decent mother." She was covered in burns and bruises from his persistent beating of the pro in the middle of the evening sky. "You don't protect the person closest to you. You try to ignore your complete failure as a wife and hero. You leave me for being strange. You don't care about how awful your daughter is, and you vent your self-loathing on me without considering the consequences of your actions. You dare to call yourself a hero, though." Izuku pulled back his arm for a befitting farewell after finally stopping his tirade. Another close-up view of his might, which sets him far apart from other villains. Way above her, Flashfire Fist. Without holding back this time. Jet Burn. Green flames that were nearly white-hot erupted from his elbow and back of his hand, propelling his fist forward. In an instant, it made contact with Inko's tummy. Her entire body was consumed by an extremely hot beam of fire that was discharged upon impact. As she was hurled rapidly to the ground, Inko let out a cry. The devil chased after her, saying, "We're not done." He provided a soft landing for her by landing on the roof of the building she was headed toward, by bringing his knee up. When Inko struck his knee, the force of the contact caused her spine to curve unnaturally. He had his knee almost buried in her ass. They were both oblivious to her agonized, frantic whimpers as horrifying cracking sounds filled their ears. Izuku cruelly kicked Inko off of him and onto the alley floor, which had 4 recognizable black scuffs on it. Inko was about to exhale when she had another hard smack to the back. The anguish was so intense that she vomited blood. After stepping on her, the Green Devil started to burn her alive. "You hurt someone who has nothing to do with us, on top of ignoring me, as if it weren't awful enough. Someone I hold in high regard. She's been more of a mother to me in 2 weeks than you've been in years. Izuku's resentful thoughts made his fires burn even more fiercely. From the broken pro's back, struggling to remain conscious, black smoke erupted. It seemed to her that her eyes would never open if she closed them. Whoop! Whoop! The sound of the police is that. 4 officers with rifles aimed at the demon had emerged from 2 police cars. Police! Freeze! We've got you AARRGGHH, Izuku, without even turning to face them, threw his palm behind him and unleashed a massive stream of flames that engulfed both cars and 3 officers. Only 1 officer managed to roll out of the way in time, but he was still hurt as their cars burst into bright orange flames. He said without regret, "Stay down before you become kindling for my fire. That goes double for you." Izuku glanced ahead, recalling that Bakugo and Yagi had attempted to battle him in this same alley. Furthermore, it might now be his mother's last resting place. However, he was unable to ignore the final phrase she spoke. She uttered, "Zoo," before eventually becoming motionless. Izuku's raging fury subsided for some reason. He really hated the shame beneath his boot. Don't do this, however, something inside him said. Was it sympathy? Feelings of regret? No, most definitely not. It was something exotic, whatever it was. Not familiar, however, he chose to pay attention to it, removed his foot from the woman, and extinguished his fire. Teleki was brutally beaten, as evidenced by the horrifying condition of her back. Her muscles, tendons, and spinal cord were all apparent due to the extreme melting of her flesh. Izuku glanced down at his alleged mom, and had no feelings. No sorrow, no pity, no anger. What kind of sick joke were you pulling here, huh? I only get your attention when I don't want it? Look at you now, hero. You know something? I used to look up to you. Can't imagine why. And up until a few weeks ago, I was afraid of you. Afraid you'd find me. And now that you have, I actually feel insulted by myself. You're not even pathetic, you're just nothing. Izuku approached and stood directly beside her head. You brought this on yourself. When you charge at me with your self-righteousness, what did you expect to happen? You didn't even have moral high ground. Did you learn nothing from your daughter's mistakes? Oh, what am I saying? Of course not. Because you're a fucking failure of a mother and a shitty excuse for a hero. Izuku then lowered his voice to Inko's. I didn't kill those people, you did. Those gutter punks, those officers, all dead because you pushed me. Their blood is on your hands. How does that feel, hero? Izuku felt a great sense of relief when he eventually finished speaking and got up to leave the alley. He noticed a policeman on the ground, crawling near where his pistol had been blown away, still alive but obviously damaged. Izuku approached to the officer while once more covering his face with his flames. The emerald monster put his foot on his hand as he was putting his hand on his revolver. The officer flinched in agony. He said, icily, "Evening, officer." To someone who had been pushed over the line, his frantic screams, "Why you? How could you do this? I thought you changed. You can't do this," had no weight. The devil put his foot down even harder on the man's hand, causing it to bleed. You could say I had a change of heart, and you can thank the pro in that alley. I suggest you call an ambulance, she's knocking on death's door. If she dies here, All Might would be so sad, wouldn't he? He said. As smoke rose beneath his feet, the devil looked angrily and said, "Please, think about what you're doing. You're better than this. Remember those kids you saved?" He snarled, "Don't remind me of my greatest regret." The policeman gazed in disbelief at the flaming green orbs that lacked warmth. But speaking of them, they're being trained by All Might, right? Excellent. Then Teleki will make the perfect motivational gift for them. For a brief while, Izuku's expression went blank. Tell me, Green Devil, are you really a child or a monster? I am what this unbalanced world molded me to be. The cop was alarmed as the heat on his hand kept rising. The heat was getting to his pistol, too. Know why? Bang. Red stuff flowing from the bottom of his foot. Izuku raised his foot to examine the injury. There was a heap of ashes where the gun had been. A pool of blood and bone protruded from the end of the officer's forearm where his hand had been. Before taking flight, Izuku turned away and hovered in midair. Tell Tsukachi and the big man I said hello. The events were starting to hit in as Izuku took off into the darkness. In addition to killing 3 police officers and seriously wounding one, he almost killed a professional. All Might and the whole hero society would undoubtedly be against him. Furthermore, the people would not support him killing police officers at this time. The villains who may come to view him as more bother than he's worth should also be considered. Well, fuck. Despite being aware of this, he didn't feel deterred or afraid. Looks like I'm going to have members from both sides coming after me. His lips curled into a little smile. Hated by all, huh? Almost nothing that I'm not accustomed to. We shall see how long I last. In other places, splendid, superb, absolutely stupendous. Well done, Izuku, you far exceeded my expectations. Someone in the shadows said as he saw the green devil leave the area. I thought you would toe the line after nearly killing your mother, but the things you said to her as she died. And that poor officer you spared before. Simply poetic. And the feeling you had when you spared your dear mother, I know what it really was. You felt that it's too soon for her to embrace the sweet release of death. She has too much to face before she can be allowed to die. I agree completely. The villain smiled grotesquely to himself as a series of test tubes containing oddly distorted figures lit up behind him. But, as you know, this will make All Might desperate to find you. Assuming he's not too busy grooming that dog and that poor excuse for a successor. Fear not, I have faith that you will be able to handle him when the time comes. You know better than anyone that knowledge can be an even sharper blade than raw strength. I'll be watching you very carefully, and sending a few tests of my own to help you reach your peak. Show us what you're made of, make us proud. The following day, Ray had just gotten a reprimand from her nurse for acting carelessly, which resulted in her getting a patch on her forehead. She was thereby permanently trapped within the hospital's walls, but she didn't give a damn. All she wanted was to see Zu once more, but she didn't think she would have the opportunity. For that, she detested Teleki. Yes, the Green Devil was present, but she started the altercation. Ray didn't realize the young man from the other building was seeing her through her window as she was stewing. Izuku had a twinge of sorrow. I apologize, but this is for your own benefit. I will avoid you if I genuinely care about you. Farewell. Mom. The dreamscape of Inko in the center of a deserted park stood Inko, or more accurately, Teleki. She recalls taking Azumi and Izuku to the same park until they were 8 years old. She only brought one of them when she first started. However, the park had changed. Smoke was still rising, and everything had either melted or burned to ash. It seemed like it had just been destroyed. Mom. When Teleki heard that voice, she froze. She caught a glimpse of her child in his middle school outfit across the playground. His condition was appalling. He was bleeding and bruised, as if he had just been attacked, and his outfit was scorched and scuffed. Inko hurried toward him, tears streaming down his face. Izuku. Don't worry, it'll be okay. I'll protect you, he said, beginning to back away as she approached, his expression growing more uncomfortable. However, she disregarded his emotions and continued to run as normal. That gave her a close-up look at Izuku's heart being held in front of her as a hand exploded through his chest from behind. Both her and Izuku's eyes dilated in sheer horror, and Izuku was lifted off his feet and vomited a gruesome amount of blood. When Inko turned to look behind Izuku, he saw a figure dressed in green fire that was exactly his height. With the crackle of fire behind it, he said in a distorted voice, "Hello again, Teleki. You." Abruptly, a forest of fire covered the playground. Izuku gasped as smoke spilled from his mouth and wounds, and the bleeding hand that held his heart was lit on fire. Teleki held out her hand and cried, "Get off my son." But nothing occurred. Disappointed, the Green Devil only shook his head. Inko tightened her fists and attempted to swing them, but was restrained by green chains that wrapped around her. How dense are you? Did you already forget I can neutralize telekinetic waves? You're powerless. You monster. You won't get away with this. For all the lives you've taken, I will, air. Izuku's final moan, which emerged from his mouth as green flames, interrupted Teleki's valiant tirade. Inko froze at that straightforward question. Spare me your heroic drivel nonsense. Without power, you're not even worth looking at. Don't you agree? She witnessed a genuinely terrifying scene behind the Emerald Demon. Ah yes, them. They made good entertainment, but they broke far too easily. Katsuki and Izumi lay dead on the ground behind them all, and Izuku would soon join them. Inko felt her heart sink and her stomach turn around. Her pride and joy were the dead, bloodied bodies, and she couldn't take her eyes off of them. Even Katsuki, who was close enough to be regarded as family even though he was her nephew. Mom. Izuku, who was now completely unrecognizable, caught Inko's attention. His eyes were melted out of his skull, his muscles, bones, and tendons were exposed, his uniform was completely burned away, layers of skin had peeled off and burned away, and his heart was being held in a temperature that was almost as hot as the sun. What followed was even worse. Why didn't you save us? Before the scene changed to a flaming cemetery, Teleki was perplexed. They stood directly behind a tombstone that looked eerily familiar. The Green Devil was cradling her lone son just over the tombstone of Hisashi Midoriya, a devoted husband and father. The broken heroine's eyes gushed tears like rivers, yet they did nothing to stop the green flames from blazing. "You weren't there when we needed you. How disappointing." Izuku said his last words before his body was converted to ash on the grave and his heart was crushed by the Green Devil. Teleki wanted to die, but she refrained. The beast went away, his back to her. She said, "You're a monster. For turning my back on the weak? Ruining futures? Who are you to judge, hero?" The truth as Inko continued to roam the corridor between life and death, he thought, Izuku. The best medical professionals at Central Hospital, together with All Might himself, were watching her horribly injured body with caution and vigilance. Holding his comatose wife's hand, the bloated bag of muscles prayed for her recovery and cursed the monster that had done this. He was reassured by the doctors that she would recover even though she was near death. Not the same as previously, though. Teleki had a terrible back. Going future, her agility will be severely limited. Her ability to sense below the waist is already a miracle. Meanwhile, at a meeting space that has been reserved, Endeavor slammed his palm on the table and reprimanded Tsukachi with his own naive words, saying, "A road to healing, you said. He may come quietly, you said. A better life for him, you said." Not having the stamina to handle number two's tirade, the detective who called the meeting moaned into his hands. With the sole objective of capturing the Green Devil of Musutafu, the conference room was set aside for police officers and heroes. They recruited more seasoned superiors as well as local heroes like Backdraft, Kamui Woods, Death Arms, and Mount Lady. Ingenium from the top 20. Mirko, Hawks, Endeavor, Finest Genist, and All Might, the greatest of the finest, were among the 10. He went straight to his wife's chamber, which caused him to be late for the meeting. Their directives were straightforward. Monitor the streets where the devil is most frequently seen or has been spotted, and apprehend him immediately. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss how to proceed. One of us tries to bring in that menace calmly, and what does he do? Hospitalizes Teleki. Endeavor shouted. Endeavor sneered and hurried out the door, saying, "With all due respect, Endeavor, that's why we're here. To discuss strategy about dealing with this guy." Tsukachi pinched the bridge of his nose as the flame hero departed, saying, "Strategy for what? Some brat on a power trip. I'll leave you with some of my sidekicks, they should do." Mount Lady said, "Now that's what I call a team player." Hawks remarked, "He lasted longer than I was expecting." Mirko, appearing irritated and tapping her foot up and down, said, "How about we get this started before I bounce, too?" Tsukachi let out a sigh. "All right, here's our target. Mori? Well, Endeavor and All Might are capable enough." A figure with two short antennae on his forehead and green skin stepped forward. Memory was a peculiarity of this man. She has the ability to examine a person's memory and transform it into media that can be viewed by others. To be seen by others, it must be transferred to a gadget, and the degree of resistance of the mind he is studying determines whether or not he can see anything. A short figure with green fire blocking his face and chest appeared on the screen at the end of the chamber. Death Arms snarled, "Grr. This rug rat. Because the vigilante saved those two children while he was waiting for a chance to do it himself, he harbored a small grudge against him. The Green Devil, at least that's what the public calls him. From what we've gathered, he's killed 5 villains and 3 officers, brutally injured Teleki and leaves behind a trail of half-dead criminals in his wake. He's a child, likely 12 or 13 with a green fire quirk not in our database." A lot of people at the table appeared to be taken by surprise. Tsukachi shook his head, asking, "Isn't this a little extreme? He's really that young? Maybe it's just a delinquency phase." A list of the Green Devil's recognized skills was displayed on the projector. "You think he's someone to take lightly? Tell that to Teleki in the emergency room." His flames burned chillingly cold, invoking fear and unease in his opponents to throw them off. He can also turn up the temperature to a degree that can cremate people in an instant. He's shown flight capabilities, pyrokinesis, as well as next-level combat abilities and adaptation. He learns from each battle and uses that experience to improve himself. In an alley, he fought 2 kids, one of them with a telekinetic quirk. A few weeks later, he develops a technique that renders him invincible to telekinetic waves, which is how he defeated Teleki. He was nearly killed by a villain with a blade quirk, and short after that he develops a more devastating blade of his own. Sharp and hot enough to cut through anything. This was becoming serious to the heroes. His ability to learn and adapt may be his most dangerous weapon. We need to bring him in as soon as possible. That's why you're all here. Win or lose, as long as he's still alive out there, he'll continue to learn and grow. And the more time that passes, the more violent he seems to get. The worst case scenario we're trying to avoid is if he kills anyone in his way and has the strength to stand up to even our champions. The best genist raised her voice. To that end, you must have come up with a plan for us in case we run into this powerful child. Tsukachi grinned. Death Arms placed his hand on the table and said, you will all be patrolling in teams of 2. We're creating conditions to give the devil extremely low chances of victory or escaping. Tsukachi nodded to Mori, who changed the projection to video format. Hold up, all of us, plus police and other heroes patrolling the streets is already enough. Now team ups. This is a kid we're talking about. It came from Teleki herself and the people in the alley where the Green Devil incinerated a criminal. Although the movie was short, it was sufficient to dispel the hero's uncertainties regarding this tiny danger. The Emerald Demon showed his vicious will and will to live when he was pressed up against the wall. He gets so hot that he wipes out a number of pros when provoked by Teleki, albeit it's unclear how. Most astonishingly, he was able to replicate Endeavor's Flashfire Fist exactly. What a grown man had spent years of his life learning, a kid could do. Endeavor would have been so furious that the room would have turned to ash, so it's actually a good thing he walked. Egotists with inferiority complexes. When All Might eventually entered the meeting, he stated, that is what we are fighting. The reason we're all here today. Since he wasn't grinning, they could all tell he was serious. Hawks raised his hand and said, hey, something's been nagging at me. So this kid has a super powerful quirk that, for all we know, can do anything. How is it we don't have it in our database? Good question, Hawks. Tsukachi responded. He could just simply be a late bloomer. It's also possible that he and his ability were kept hidden by someone else. Tsukachi returned the conversation to their purpose, asking, someone able to hide a super powerful kid from the world for 13 years? Who's good enough at hiding to pull that off? As I said, we're creating conditions so that the devil is disadvantaged. You'll all be patrolling in teams. Ingenium and Best Genist, a speedster and a capture specialist work well together. Death Arms and Mount Lady, using their incredible physical prowess. Kamui Woods and Backdraft, power to cool flames and wide capture range. Endeavor and Mirko didn't want to be stuck with sidekicks, so she bounced on her own. Hawks and All Might, unrivaled power and speed. Looks like it's you and me, huh big guy? Hawk's easygoing manner restored All Might's smile, albeit a smaller one than normal. I'm glad to have you by my side, wing hero. Tsukachi gave a collective clap of his hands. All right, you've all been assigned your teams. Remember, if you encounter the devil, be quick and decisive. No dragging the fight out or dropping your guard. He has a knack for adapting. Next to Backdraft, Kamui stated, understood. Death Arms slammed his fist into his palm and shouted, that demon's going straight to hell. Mount Lady pointed out to him, a kid demon. The majority of the heroes departed to start patrolling their assigned zones after the conference. Tsukachi and All Might remained behind and conversed in the interim. When asked, so, how are the kids taking this? Toshinori became agitated. This hasn't done anything to deter Katsuki's determination. In fact, he's putting even more effort into training. Izumi is too, but she's scared. She and her mother share the same quirk, and you saw what happened. For a little while, Toshinori was perplexed before recalling, yeah. And the other one? Tsukachi nodded without glancing at the symbol of peace, saying, yes, Melissa is actually more motivated to come to Japan with her support expertise. She's eager to outfit Katsuki and Izumi with her own impressive inventions. When All Might made its American debut, David Shield was his first choice for costumes and equipment. Right, David Shield's daughter. History repeats itself, huh? He is now imagining Melissa and Izumi as the continuation of that happy recollection. Therefore, it appears that he has chosen his successor. However, Tsukachi was troubled by something. He mentioned his eccentric niece, who would move in next year, but not his missing son. Don't tell me, Toshinori. Hawks returned to the room with his easy smile, interrupting their talk. All Might smiled back. Ready to do this, number one? He asked. Tsukachi watched them take off, saying, don't start without me, Hawks. Hawks waved over his shoulder and said, even if you can't find the devil, gather any and all intel you can. The door shut behind the words, you got it boss man. After 5 seconds the words, we've got a problem, boss man, made Tsukachi almost burst out laughing. Damn it, Hawks. Our next case could be my death if you keep that up. And what problem? You haven't even left the building yet. Hawks gazed at the city beyond the window. Sukachi sighed. I think you know what I'm talking about. The big guy. Sukachi put some coffee on the pot while listening to the young pro. Look, I have nothing but respect for All Might, but in his current state of mind, he could be more trouble than help in this. I mean, he wasn't even smiling when he walked in. Most of the general public can't imagine what that looks like. Hawks placed his palm under his chin and pondered. Yeah, after what happened to Teleki, he'll likely be less than patient enough for this situation. Late bloomer, he had a quirkless son, didn't he? Missing, allegedly kidnapped? Sukachi grinned. He was asked to play the video recollection of Teleki's run-in with the devil by Hawks. This time he took a closer look at the green flame user. In the beginning, it looked like he was messing with Teleki, not taking her seriously. He seemed pretty talkative for a broody rebel. Though, that could just be disliking of heroes in general. The clip proceeded until it ended. That's definitely not something to ignore. Whatever Teleki said or did, it made him fight like a different person. Something just snapped. Something inside of him. A sip of Sukachi's coffee was taken. Hawks lowered his golden specs and said, "Too bad Teleki doesn't remember more details. She was so focused on him, it's like tunnel vision. This kid, you said he's not only strong but smart. He observes abilities, even mid-battle, and adapts to meet them, or copies them to get an edge. His fighting style could change at any point. He must have a library of notes, huh?" Sukachi was staring at his mug. Real quick, what was Teleki's ex-husband's quirk? Fire breath, but nowhere near the level the Green Devil is on. Kids often show more potential than their parents had. Izuku Yagi is an example of that. One last thing I'm curious about, his motivation. What's he trying to achieve? What pushed him to be the Green Devil? Sukachi put down his drink. He gestured for the wing hero to follow him, saying, "Don't tell All Might." He handed Hawks a file that had only been visible to him up until this point. Yagi Izuku, born without a peculiarity. The Green Devil goes missing in the same week. Telekinesis and fire type are peculiarities of parents. Hawk quickly perused the file. It was conjecture backed up by substantial evidence. He closed it, his countenance uncommonly solemn as he gazed at Sukachi. All Might and Teleki can't see this, not until we have solid proof. They walked out of the building together. Izuku spent years of his life studying all kinds of heroes, villains and their quirks and fighting styles. He has encyclopedic knowledge on the subject, and pairing that with bitterness and a power we know little about, it could be seriously bad. Sukachi grinned. We'll stop him from falling even deeper. No matter what he's done, he's still a hurting child. In other places, isn't this a double-edged sword? You've become so strong, that now the heroes are mobilizing. Though perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. I wonder how the adoring public will react as their champions fail to bring down a lone vigilante, and in turn giving burgeoning villains inspiration to act. All Might being in the dark about Izuku's fate works in my favor. He'll swing mercilessly at his own son, feeding the fire that propels him. This will make quite a delectable show. The man in the shadows gave a terrible smile. You heroes have unknowingly doomed yourselves, and will only sharpen the blade that will end up in my grasp.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.